Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 103, which is our first Splendid Isolation stream of 2023. So, yeah, and as always, I'm going to start us off with where are we? I've had 2 weeks off and I got really rusty at this now. There we go.
From here to Riley, from Leeds to Lahore. On the show, a lot now at the tower, and 55 more all ended in war. Like depth and his quickness, the depth and the thickness, thickness I've known on my way. But I'm old and nervous, I'm cast on the surface, and all my nervous, a shilling a day. A shilling a day, what a blooming good pay. Lucky to touch shilling a day. Shilling a day, boys, a blooming good pay. To touch it, a shilling a day. Though it drives me half crazy to think of the days I went slap for the gazy, my sword at my side. And we rode hell for leather, both squadrons together, that didn't care whether we lived or we died. But it's no use despairing, my wife was no sharing, and ye commissaire in the pay to better. So it me you be holding the wet and the cold by the grand metro please give me a letter. Oh, give him the letter, can do no better. The troops are the major, run with a letter. Give him his letter, can do no better. Troops Sergeant Major, run without a letter. A shilling a day, what a blooming good pay. I'm lucky to touch it, a shilling a day. Shilling a day, boys, a blooming good pay. I'm lucky to touch it, a shilling a day.
Okay, that of course was Chris Gard, who's often a guest on this show. Don't think he's going to be today because I haven't heard from him. And do go and check out his channel if you like some really good traditional music. Okay, this is our first stream of 2023. How are we all going today, gents? Mitch, Ataman, Tristan, Thomas, how are you going, boys?
Same old, same old.
Pretty good. Thank you for asking.
I think Ataman's probably not back yet. Okay, well, as always, I'm going to start us off by asking our guests if they had a particular subject to bring up. I'm going to start with Mitch. Did you have something you wanted to talk about first, Mitch?
I normally talk about Ukraine, but there's in Poland there's been a big row, as it usually is these days, about the Black Eyed Peas performing there with pride flag armbands and generally shilling the LGBTQ crap over in Poland with their concert.
They're a mixed race band, aren't they, I think?
Yeah, it's like you got one woman called Fergie who's white, but then you've got the lead singer who's black, and then 2 other singers whose race I don't know.
Yeah. No, I thought they were a mixed race. I kind of remember them from the early 2000s. They're quite an old band these days.
Yeah, they've just been shilling the whole sort of Poland is racist, sexist, homophobic, you name it. So there's that. And the Polish government is like, but they apparently made a deal with Black-eyed people. They said, okay, you can share all this LGBTQ and immigration stuff so long as you praise us for supporting Ukraine. So
yeah, it's insane if you ask me.
Yeah, it's coming to a position where if you're a Polish right winger, I mean, it's becoming ever more obvious that the government there, which is supposedly conservative, doesn't actually do much to conserve. But it's basically like Poland at this point is kind of like what England was like in the early 1960s. It just takes one sledgehammer attempt by the left, and I think Poland would fall like a house of cards, sadly.
Yeah, I don't think their involvement in the Ukraine stuff is doing them any favors at all, to be honest with you.
I mean, it's if anything, it's subsuming them even more because I mean, for example, they're buying a lot more military gear from the Americans to supplement their army, which the fact that Poland doesn't rely upon itself to produce their own weaponry, I mean, that itself is damning enough. Never mind how much their ruling party shields itself to America day in, day out.
Yeah,
So,
I think the Poles have allowed their hatred of Russia to like overcome their good sense in many respects.
yeah, I can understand my hatred. You can on one hand understand my hatred towards Russia, but then it's also okay. I mean, like in terms of what countries I would prefer to be alliance with, I mean, America seems to want to micromanage every aspect you do. Like if you're not pro LGBTQ enough or you're not pro immigration enough, then they'll just get rid of you at some point. Whereas with Russia, it just seems to be, oh yeah, don't act like a dick towards us, and you're generally all right, but we won't kill you or get rid of you.
I was watching Semiagog on Millennial Yule, and he was saying that like this idea of Poland taking over all or parts of the Ukraine really goes back to just after the First World War as a Polish idea.
Yeah, intermarium, they call it. The idea
Yeah.
that because they want, because back in there's a guy whose name I can't pronounce, like Josef Pilsudski or something like that. He wanted some sort of like Eastern European Federation to go from Finland in the Baltic all the way down to Romania to form some sort of like big alliance to ward off the Bolsheviks. But that never came to pass because, yeah, most of the countries that could have been part of it never wanted to because of neutrality reasons. And Poland, ever since, it still maintains the idea. However, it's been co-opted by the loss of Boris Johnson and Joe Biden now.
Yeah, that makes a good deal of sense. I mean, from what I can see of the war in Ukraine at the moment, it looks like the Russians are gradually capturing backward.
Yeah, I'm hearing of one city called Solidar, which is actually more important because it's always like it protects the flanks of two main important locations in that area. That falling rather like the battle for that started like a few weeks ago, like really seriously, and now it's just collapsing like a house of cards. Like I'm even hearing of villages near there that's just collapsing without much of a fight. The Russians just stroll into the place.
Yeah, I've been seeing some of that on Telegram. There's Telegram channels that are doing this because I now watch a bit of Telegram because they no longer require you to give them a phone number, which I think is a good thing because I'm not keen on handing my phone numbers over to. I mean, I don't actually own a telephone for one thing, but even if I did, I wouldn't be very happy handing them over to random websites. But you know. Given how they can trace these things these days so easily.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of a war, I mean, I'm hearing now that WhatsApp is being used by the Ukrainians to find the locations of Russian units because a lot of these Russian units, for whatever reason, they still have mobile phones at the front, and the troops use WhatsApp, which is a lot more hackable than Telegram.
I thought the Russians took the mobile phones off their blokes before they went into the combat zone.
Wagner does the actual contract Nikki types. They did. It seems immobilized, however, because they basically said to the higher ups, "Okay, let us be able to contact our families." Which begs the question: Why don't we just use letters? like the old way.
Well, there's that, or why not keep like some mobile phones like at the battalion base, and like when they go back there, they can call their family.
Yeah, it's not just that. I mean, one reason. Another thing is the mobilized technically they're on 12-month contracts, so it's also they're also getting paid a decent amount, and the whole thing about them being there is they're doing it to fund their families, because usually they'd be working, like let's say engineering for whatever. But so that's what, because there have been admin issues within Russia with the oblasts not funding the families properly as much as should be done. So that's why the mobilisers are a bit more neurotic around that sort of stuff compared to the early onset.
I can really understand it, but I mean these days, I mean especially when you saw that Ukrainian missile blow up all those Russians the other day, you got to wonder if like they were using a mobile phone to like try and track into where those people were.
Yeah. I mean, Telegram's not as hackable compared to WhatsApp, which begs the question, why do Russians use WhatsApp? Because I thought that was more of a Western thing. Like, you might get in Poland, but I didn't think it was much of a thing in Russia, because they usually use Telegram for social media there. But, yeah.
Yeah, Lee Ham is saying in the chat, some armies get soldiers to take the SIM card out of their phones. Yeah, exactly. So you can still like take film and stuff if you want to. But you can't. I just don't understand any army allowing soldiers to take a mobile phone actually into the front line. That seems stupid to me.
Yeah, the Ukrainians do.
One that's got a SIM card in it. You know, it's just stupid.
Yeah, like I mean, I've heard of you get videos in Ukraine where it's Ukrainian soldiers, they're taking videos and they're complaining about the high command screwing them over.
Oh yeah, I've seen that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta wonder why the Ukrainian high command doesn't just take everyone's phones, because that would damage morale far more than the artillery shells that you get in Bakhmut.
Yeah, I just think the Russians should just like, if they're going to allow these blokes to have mobile phones at all, they should, like Lee Ham said in the chat, take the bloody SIM cards out of them and only yet let them use those somewhere in the rear when they're having a break.
Yeah, I mean, there's also like some people on Telegram say also, oh, we should use payphones, but I don't know if I'm pretty sure payphones are still traceable. I mean, at the end of the day, they should just go back to what, for example, what the likes of Tolkien would have done in World War One, and write letters through pen and paper, not use damn telephones.
Yeah, they even used to give soldiers like postcards and stuff. So that is what they probably do need to know, but I don't know. But yeah, a couple of people in the chat. Telegram nowadays doesn't require you to give them a mobile phone number. There's another way of doing it. So if anyone didn't use Telegram because of that's not the case anymore. Did anyone else have anything to add on either Poland or Ukraine or any of that stuff?
No, nothing from me. It's a bit of a, actually, to be honest, it's a bit of a funny story, because it's really just dropped out of the news cycle quite surreally, to be honest. Yeah,
I mean, I see it mentioned quite often on British Forces YouTube channel and stuff like that, which is run by the Ministry of Defence, of course, and is basically vile. Nearly everything they put out is LGBTQ or feminist, or pro-Ukraine. But yeah. Ataman, did you have a first subject you wanted to talk about this evening?
Well, there's a couple of good stories actually, but I think we should talk about this James Goddard story.
But we were talking about this before we went live. Yeah, go on.
So I mean, for anyone that isn't familiar, James Goddard, I don't know whenabouts. It was a little while ago. He was a Tommy Robinson guy, one of those sorts. Mm-hmm. Then he left that and he kind of joined up with PA, the Patriotic Alternative guys.
Yes.
And then I think he kind of also found them to be a bit whatever. He's kind of left them, and he's kind of, I think he's sort of independent now, just sort of moves around, comments on stuff. I'm not sure of his exact, but anyway, he posted up supposedly posted up a video on his Twitter. His Twitter's gone now, so I don't know what it contained, but it had the caption on it, Wembley got the rainbow treatment. And I think he was commenting on the pride flags, so-called pride flags down the sort of Wembley Boulevard bit. And he got a letter, I think, over Christmas from the police, saying that they want to request him, they're requiring him to attend a voluntary interview, because they think that what he said was grossly offensive and it contravenes the section 127 of the Malicious Communications Act. I mean, obviously, they just mean the Communications Act. There's actually no such thing as the Malicious Communications Act.
How can they require him to attend a voluntary interview?
Well, this is what they do, isn't it? I forget that guy's name. There was I mean, this is the funny thing about this requirement, this legal thing, is that they did go through. I cannot remember the guy's name, but there was a guy. There was a former police officer who got done under one of these non-crime hate incidences, and they did the same thing to him. We require you to attend a voluntary interview, but it always ends with them essentially putting this thing against your record. I mean, he sued them and he won, and they're still doing this stuff. They're still rolling this stuff out. I remember reading a story as well a while ago that was never. It might not have been true because it was never sort of verified in any way, but there was a story of a guy who bought a car that had like a GB sticker in the window, like a little Union flag, and in the back window. And I don't think he really paid it any mind, and he was driving it around, and I think someone reported him for it, and he got one of these put on his record. But he was training to go into children's care, so it sort of jeopardized his career. And sort of when he was trying to deal with the police over it, essentially they were just telling him, we don't care what you think. If you don't like it, sue us.
Jesus, when I was even when I was like in my 20s in the UK, like loads of people had GB stickers on their car.
Yeah. They were really common at one point, weren't they? It's
it's just like the French had F stickers on their car, and the Germans had G stickers or whatever it was.
Yeah, this is the thing. It wasn't clear whether what he was talking about was one of those sort of legacy country identifier stickers that you used to have on your car if you went to the continent, or if it was actually just a little stylized little GB sticker in the window or something.
Well, but I mean, even a GB sticker in the window. What the fuck is wrong with that in Britain, for God's sake?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, the funny thing is as well is they're hunting around social media looking for like James Goddard tweets about pride flags. Well, there's burglaries up and down the country, like thousands of them just going just uninvestigated and just unresolved. The same for
priorities,
yeah. I mean, this is literally like this is literally an anarcho-tyranny, and this is what they do now. They run around looking for these offensive non-crimes to put against people's file. Someone said to me, a friend was saying, "Oh, do you think they've got a quota on it?" It wouldn't surprise me if they did.
Yeah,
but
the cops usually have a quota for the number of pulls they have to do.
Yeah.
For most crimes, so I wouldn't be at all surprised. 555 in the chat says Goddard did a stream with Nick Conn the other day, apparently.
Right. Yeah. He's still around. Harry Miller was the name of that former police officer that he was on the New Culture Forum, I think, about it. But yeah, he took the police to court over it, and he won quite soundly. I assume other people have taken them to court over it as well, because I know that the Free Speech Union was talking about that stuff. And there's another lawyer project, I think, called the Bad Laws Project, and they're talking about sort of taking the fight to this sort of stuff. But the police generally don't seem to care. They and this is kind of managerialism 101, isn't it? Like they have to pay taxpayer money through the nose for losing court cases over this stuff because it's completely indefensible, and they just do it anyway because it's not their money.
Yep. Yeah, that is absolutely true. I mean, as I was saying before we went on live, there's also been a guy in England who's been done for catcalling, taken to court for catcalling a woman, like wolf whistling or whatever it was, and he got £100 fine for it. This is the world we are going into now. It's just insanity. And as Ataman correctly said, you got thousands of burglaries and much, much more serious crimes that the police don't even really investigate at all.
Mm. Yeah, I think I read a book. It was prompted to me by someone on Twitter a while ago called "A Land Fit for Criminals" or "The Land Fit for Criminals." And there's a point in that where he says about how like traffic violations, you could say, like speeding tickets and that, were just getting handed out by like sweets by the police.
Yeah.
Sort of more recently, because it's just easier. It's just easier to throw a couple of the plod out in a car and just pull people over for stuff than it is to actually go out there and try and do any actual real policing work of things like assaults or robberies or muggings or anything.
Yeah, it's totally insane. It really is. Did anyone else have anything to add to that sort of subject in terms of like free speech online or the police devoting far more effort to being politically correct to actually catching criminals or anything of that nature?
Well, I did have one. There was one case in Scotland where that YouTuber Count Dankula, if anyone remembers him.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. He was like fined 800. Mark, I think his real name was, but he was fined £800 by the High Court in Scotland for just basically doing a video on YouTube with his girlfriend's dog, his girlfriend's pug.
Yeah, he just did a joke. He trained the dog to do something for a joke, and he got taken to court. It was ridiculous.
If like people take this kind of thing seriously, they need to understand that the actions of them. Sorry, I'm kind of this is my first time speaking. By the way, but no, I just think that I think it's ridiculous because these people are behaving like the Nazis.
Yep.
Either
the Nazis or the communists.
Their actions,
certainly totalitarian. Yeah, totalitarian.
Totalitarian. Yeah, same. It's sort of history repeating itself. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And there's certain examples.
I think there was quite an interesting little example. I think when that case came up, I remember there being an interesting little observation that some people made that there was actually a story along those lines of a Labrador or some such in German-occupied Finland in the mid-century, and the guy had a dog there that he called the Führer that used to put his paw up, and the Germans, the German government, obviously the Nazis, wanted to have him charged for this, and their legal system in place at the time still kind of recognised his right to satirise the standing government. So even there they had probably a legal structure that was a bit more forgiving of this sort of stuff than what we seem to have now, which is kind of bizarre in a way.
Well, Thomas brought up Scotland, and of course, one of the.
Can I just also add another example? It's been happening. It's been happening in my country, Ireland, where if anyone's familiar with the story, Tristan I think is on as well. He's also familiar with it. The story of Enoch Burke, the teacher, the school teacher who was he's just been released from prison. From prison over the Christmas break. He is a evangelical Christian teacher at a school in Ireland where he refused to call a student singular they them pronouns. Like, this student was male, and biologically male. We could obviously tell, who demanded that the school and the staff address this particular individual you know, address them with certain pronouns. And I think I'm. It's absolutely like this is where this madness is going. You know, the LGBT madness. It's going into our schools now, and
big time, mate, big time.
It's happening in Ireland. You know,
we all know there are only two genders. You know, there are only two genders. You're either male or female, or you're mentally ill. That's the other option.
Yeah. I'll go with mental illness for sure.
But yeah, look, I was just going to say before we move on, actually to you, Thomas, just before we do, because you guys brought up Scotland. I mean, of course, it's also worth mentioning that over the holiday period, we had the Scottish police referring to pedophiles as, minor attracted persons, MAPS, which is what they want to call themselves, because that sounds less nasty than pedophiles or nonces, which is what they really are, of course.
Yeah, well, that term pedophile is certainly correct to you know, and Scotland's legal system. I've been reading about it. I was in Scotland this time last year, and it's just, you know, like the Scottish Parliament, they're just the most absolutely authoritarian PC people out there, like Nicola Sturgeon. She just wants to, you know, she's the government in up there want to. I think they already have pushed for legislation for anyone to self-identify whatever gender. So you could be a male and say I'm a woman, and no long hair, no heels, no characteristics of what a woman looks like.
Yeah. I mean, look, you've got politicians today, including some quite well-known politicians, who will just straight away they won't say like what's a woman and what's a man. They just won't. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I mean, everyone with the least bit of common sense knows there are two genders, because if there were any more than two genders, species would die out.
Well, the question, the question, what is a woman, there's a very simple answer. It's a biological human female. Full stop.
Yeah,
and we are now trying to we're trying to reverse this now, and we're sort of rewriting the rules here, changing a different script. And I mean, look, I do believe, look, this is just my personal opinion. I do believe that my position is kind of similar to like Jordan Peterson's, like, how freedom is, with the whole thing that happened to him in Canada with Bill C-16, that was used to compel a certain speech. And I should have brought that up earlier on, because I'm actually reading Jordan Peterson's book 12 Rules for Life, and just on, he talks a lot of interesting stuff. But sorry, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. No, but I think that he certainly allows anyone to identify whatever. You can identify as a bee, and that's fine. But once you compel someone to validate that person's identification as a bee,
I get
you know that we're going off the rails here.
Yeah, no, 100%. Look, I'm going to come on to you just a sec, Thomas. But before I do, does anyone else have anything on Ataman's topic? Basically, which, like I said, is free speech, the cops getting people to voluntarily come to an interview they have to go to, and all this kind of crap. Does anyone else?
I mean, the thing is that it's not. I mean, I'm not really particularly a guy who I'm sure I'd say I'm particularly free speech either. But I do find it also a weird paradigm that we're now in this situation where the speech expected by the state is so out of kilter with the speech accepted by the individual communities.
Yep.
You know, a lot of these people that are getting pulled up for stuff for what they've said are things that you could hear in a pub, literally anywhere outside of
Yes.
maybe the most shit libby locations of like inner Bristol or downtown London or somewhere.
Yeah, you'd have to be with some complete shit lips, you know, like soy boys and feminists in some crappy cafe somewhere.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure if it's really even a free speech debate at this point. It's kind of gone beyond that.
Oh look, I mean, when you're taking guys to court for wolf whistling and chicken in the street. I mean, Jesus Christ. You know, and as you said in your original thing, Ataman, you know, criticizing gay flags all the way down the drive to Wembley, for God's sake.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. It's political correctness gone insane. But you know, this has been something that's been going on for years and years now, and it's just getting worse. It's not getting better.
I mean, they don't care about, but like the idea of political correctness either. That was only ever a Mott and Bailey tactic for them. They could just turn around and say, "Oh, you know, it's about political correctness. It's about being polite," and then when they've got you where they want you, they do what they like ultimately, and all that stuff goes out the window.
Oh yeah, for sure, 100%. Mitch, did you have anything you wanted to say on that one, mate?
No, nothing from me. That's not already been said.
Fair enough. Okay, Thomas. Thomas is a first-time guest on the show, and welcome, mate. And did you have something you wanted to bring up first?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous, but I'll take my time talking. I recently created a YouTube channel where I'm active in the area of citizen journalism in my
what's it called, Thomas?
It's called Planet of the Gael. So Gael being Gael, Gael, obviously referring to a native person from Ireland. As that was the original Gaelic civilization.
Just to let you know, if you DM me that stuff on Discord after the stream, I'll make sure I stick the link in the description of the stream later on.
Yeah, sure. And just anyone who's watching this, please do subscribe. I need a lot of subscriptions. But enough of the advertising and promotion and all this sort of stuff.
We actually get a fair number of Irish people watching us, like Brian Borrow, for example, whose comment I've got up on the screen at the moment. I'm pretty sure Brian Borrow is an Irishman. So
yeah, it's a familiar name. Yeah, but so I wanted to talk about the. I actually saw Brian Brew's comment there. Just Scotland and Ireland are worse than ever than Sweden. Well, Sweden has like Sweden with its record, with its high record of immigration. That's the way to describe it. Ireland is going through that similar situation as well. We and our political elite in Dublin are not vocal about this. They just seem to be comfortable with this. They don't seem to, like, the people are having grave concerns about the. Oh, by the way, Ireland has a population of 5 million, and there's just, we're a small island, we're a small country. We seem to have a government that wants to be this humanitarian, to the extent where we're opening our borders to absolutely every person that flocks into the country. And that without borders, there is no nation.
100%, yeah.
If you don't have a controlled, now I know Ireland, there's the Republic of Ireland and there's Northern Ireland. There's two separate political entities. So, but I'm just referring to the the Republic of Ireland, where I'm based. I actually grew up in Northern Ireland in my early years, and I live back then. I remember seeing. I only just saw just basically like there were no foreigners at the time. At least I don't remember. But then when I went to school in the south, yeah, there were some people from Poland and Lithuania and all this kind of stuff, and I didn't have an issue. I don't have an issue with anybody. See, this is what they're trying to do here. The media is trying to make this like as if, oh, we're racist, because we're not racist. We just have genuine concerns about these high level of immigrants coming in.
Well, I mean, look, if you've only got 5 million people to start with, which is also a similar population to Scotland. I mean, Scotland's like 5.5 million or something like that.
Yeah.
And Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland wants to do exactly the same thing. If you've only got like 5.5 million people to start with, it doesn't take that much immigration before your indigenous population, the real population of a country like Ireland or Scotland, is completely swamped.
I mean, I did notice that even though like we have like 80 years or 70 years on Ireland in terms of sort of replacement migration, and yet just because Ireland's population is so tiny to start with, it looks like you guys might become a minority before we do, just by because they're almost like speed running it as well over there.
Well, I'll say this: there is a professor here. He always, as far as I remember, he didn't have a very Irish sounding name. It was like von Protzinski or something. I think it was German. Anyway, he was a university professor here in Ireland who said that by 2050 that the Irish could become a minority in their own country. He said that by then there'll be Chinese people. I think he said that there'll be Chinese. The Chinese will ethnic Chinese will be the largest ethnic group or something like that. So.
You can tell me this, Thomas, but I'm pretty sure that even Sinn Féin, which is
they're sellouts.
Yeah, the political wing of the provisional IRA, Sinn Féin, who, to be fair, even when I was in the British Army serving in Northern Ireland in the 1980s, the leadership of Sinn Féin was Marxist, for the most part.
And they still are.
Yeah, and those guys totally support this third world immigration into Ireland. Like it's literally Brits out, Somalians in.
Yeah,
it's insane.
Well, no, that's a very accurate way of describing it. It's like they like there's many. Look, no matter what your whole view is on people who were in the IRA. Look, there's many of them who obviously regret. I've met some of them who have said that. Look, that was a different time. They've moved on, but now I was talking to them, and now they're saying to me, look, or just nationalists in general who are saying, did Bobby Sands really die for this kind of stuff? Did he really die for to see abortion on demand? We have all this degeneracy that we see happening in our country. We are and to like there's this one. Several members of Sinn Féin are, several members, certainly the leadership, are now having an issue with Irish people being racist and belonging to the far right, which like all these accusations, they're starting. People will turn their votes away from them if they, because I know plenty of native Irish who are not racist. They're just they want Ireland to be safe and secure, to have a very common sense immigration policy that works for all. The Sinn Féin support open borders as well. They have their Ardèche in 1998.
They do.
Calls for.
I know they do, Thomas. And all I would just say to that is, like, if someone calls me racist, I just laugh at them these days.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, you definitely shouldn't lose any sleep over it, but
No.
it is still a serious accusation. People lose their jobs over stuff like that.
All right. Well, look, let me be clear. I'm semi-retired, and the work I do, I'm self-employed. So
Yeah.
from that point of view, I have a big advantage over many
Mm.
younger people because, like, I'm an old bastard. But honestly, if someone calls me racist, I just laugh.
Yeah,
Because in my experience, all people of all colours and all races all around the world are to some degree racist. There's always an in-group preference, always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
the only people who are not allowed to have one is white people, basically.
Yeah. I think people should, if you are getting called that, you need to be mindful of the situation. I mean, for me, if it's let's say in a place where someone can't hold something over me, like a social setting, then I just laugh at them. If it's said, you know, somewhere else where it's a bit more, it could be used against me, like within line of my place of work or something, then I tell that person they've got to back up their claims. I make them withdraw the statement.
No, I say that as well. Like if anyone's got an argument worth having, be sure to back it up. Otherwise, like if someone called me racist, like in return I'll call them a pedophile because you're calling me a word that has absolutely no meaning. So I may as well engage in that sort of that particular exchange. I'm sorry, I'm not particularly very articulate enough. I'm not very good at speaking enough on this. It's like,
you're doing fine. You're doing fine. Don't worry.
I become very vocal and like, listen, I hope to get better as well with my journalism. I've dedicated myself now to, as much as I have an interest in politics, but journalism is more my flair because I like to, I like to talk to everyone. Like I like to, just engage in conversations and like if someone and I've no agenda, I've no bias. I'm just interested in meeting whoever's out there. Whatever political affiliation, it doesn't matter. I'll talk to you. But if someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, you're that far right journalist I saw, who's interviewed that politician with who's a neo-Nazi, who's a neo-Nazi, all that sort of stuff, it just shows that it's just because okay, first of all, I want to keep journalism up. Journalism at this point is just going down the drain. There's no, you will find with the BBC or RTE as we have in Ireland, they're just absolutely I don't think they're telling the truth enough. All I can do is just have my phone, and I could be going to a politician and asking them all these hard. That's what I need to do is I need to ask all these people who have these agendas, for sure. LGBT, pedophilia, open borders, all this stuff. Of course I'm going to hold them accountable over it, whether they like it or not. I'm just going to say that.
Thomas, could I ask you, from what I see, and I'm looking at this from the outside, and bear in mind, I live in Australia these days, although I'm an Englishman, although my mother actually came from Tipperary in Ireland. But
nice.
Yeah, she was half Welsh, but she came from Tipperary. Looking at this from the outside, I can see the same thing happening in the Republic of Ireland that is happening in large parts of England and Wales and what have you, where you're getting even small towns and big villages that are being absolutely taken over by large numbers of these bloody so-called refugees, none of whom are, of course, because in order to get to Britain or Ireland, you've got to go through a huge number of safe countries before you can get to them. So it's just nonsense.
Yeah. A lot of them go to Germany. Say if you're coming from Syria, you go to Germany first, or you go anywhere in Europe. Well, it depends. Well, first of all, it depends where you're coming from. Because plenty of Africans, African migrants come. They land in Mediterranean countries, Greece, Italy, Spain, and there's camps and all this sort of stuff, and they say, "Oh, we want to come to Ireland," so. Or the UK and make a better life for ourselves. And
I know I saw a show. I don't remember what it was. It was some video that was on YouTube, and there's some little Irish village which is apparently quite popular for people from Dublin and cities to go to. You know, like for the holidays and stuff like this. And even this little village was getting taken over by Somalians and what have you.
was this in Ireland? Was it?
Yeah. It was in Southern Ireland for sure.
It must have been
Killarney.
Killarney.
Yeah, it might have been, but it was some little place that like was really very traditional, and like they were taking over hotels in this village and just filling them with immigrants, basically.
Which is happening, and just on that in the village in the town of Killarney, they put up military age males at a hotel in Killarney, and if anyone's been watching the news in Ireland, like there was a stabbing incident. A number of people were the victims of a stabbing incident that happened there, and people in those towns and villages, they find it, they don't feel safe anymore. They used to I've talked to so many people, and they've said to me, back in those days we had Garda, which is the Irish police. We used to have, there was safety, law and order. There was a lot of, back then, none of that kind of thing was going on. And I would trade place with those people, in an instant. I'd love to. I'd love to get in a time machine and go back, but it's not possible, But a lot of people are just seeing the denigration of those once safe towns and villages, like this one, this other village called Kinnegad. It's in Ireland. People can't even cross the street. People can't even, they can't even go to girls, young women can't even go to nightclubs because they're scared. Some quote unquote asylum seekers that is pretty dangerous men will come over and sexually assault them or something. That kind of stuff will happen. So
wow.
It's really sad seeing this whole thing happen.
Novatrix said in sorry, Duke, carry on.
I'll ask this and I'll let you do your one afterwards if you don't mind, Alan.
Yeah.
Lady of Shalott is asking Thomas, what does he think of Justin Barrett and the National Party? Her family in Ayr support them. They think they're Southern Ireland's only hope.
Well, if the National Party, I mean, look, I actually was a member of the National Party, but I left because I'm just more of like an independent thinker now. I don't really I'll talk to anyone, but I do know for a fact that they are the only voice against immigration. They are the only voice against, and as well, the National Party held as far as I remember, they held a party conference somewhere in Northern Ireland actually, and a group of anti-fascist hooligans. They're just hooded criminals, who just
Antifa.
Yeah, Antifa. They're an organization. They're a complete organization, and they're all. And George Soros is paying them billions, So, but anyway, these to go and the Irish government are giving them enough cover to go and subversive to go, and they're agents of the state. Their job is to go and just to go and hinder and obstruct and to especially disrupt National Party meetings. And they went to the National Party meeting in County Fermanagh, and they were just, it was just awful. Like they a number of people. I think I read somewhere that a number of people, a couple of supporters got up and they were trying to barricade them from getting in, but unfortunately enough, they suffered a lot of injuries, and they went to hospital, but the conference went on, and they just despite the just basically despite those people trying to willfully disrupt a peaceful political party meeting. I think this was going on this day and age.
Good on them for at least carrying on.
Pardon?
I said good on them for at least carrying on with their meeting instead of
absolutely, and like, but it obviously, like, it was unfortunate. My sympathies go out to those who were obviously hurt as a result of that particular incident. But I think it was someone from the party who got up and after that incident happened, and he got up and he basically, as he was speaking, he said that those people held the line. I think James was his name. He said they held the line like the brave Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae, in the face of what he called red communist thuggery, something like that.
I think, Thomas, that all of us nationalists, I guess you could say, in Western countries, we're all pretty much in the same damn position these days, sadly.
Yeah.
Ataman, sorry, you wanted to bring up a point, mate. What was it?
Yeah, it was just a bit further back. Novatrix in chat said it's literally the meme of import the third world and become the third world. And I was reminded actually this week. I made one of my little TikTok edits I made was Jonathan Bowden from his WB Yates speech, I think it was, talking about the IRA.
Mm-hmm.
And I put it on TikTok. It got nuked from orbit before it even got to 5 views. But I put it on my little backup YouTube channel, and it's gotten a bit of a resurgence. I think it was posted up by Enjoy the Decline on Telegram this week, and by a couple of people on Twitter as well, which I'm glad to see it going around. But when I was making that, and I was looking for these clips of, like, you could say, non-ethnically Irish sort of violent outbursts in Ireland, and I was absolutely shocked at the amount of footage of this stuff. It's for such a small country, it's almost like you can almost find more clips from Ireland of this stuff than you can from England.
And it's a pretty rural country, Ireland, isn't it? I mean,
apart
from Dublin, Dublin's the only really big city in Ireland.
Yeah. But the other thing as well was like some of the areas where these people have sort of moved in, where they've become sort of like non-Irish communities now. These places look really fucking slummy. I had Google Maps up open on a second tab, and I was just having to go and double check all the locations because I didn't know where. If these were genuine Irish videos or if I was just scraping videos from all over the bloody third world. But I sometimes check some of these places on Street View as well, and they've noticeably gone downhill in the last sort of like 2 years.
And like even 20 years ago, Ireland was like a pretty traditional Catholic country.
Yeah,
like Southern Ireland.
Yeah,
it was a very traditional kind of Catholic country. And
yeah,
women and kids could walk about pretty safely,
Yeah, and I actually called for it very much to be brought back, because like 90% of Native Irish, I am a Roman Catholic, but I also do know that the whole Christian religion, like it's not just like it, because with the whole thing with Northern Ireland as well, like the Catholic and Protestant divide, like, I mean, I just see how it's just very important. Like it used to be Catholic versus Protestant. Now it's just Christian versus like Islamic, or whatever religion that they practice now. Because there's plenty of I just think that the Irish government are discriminating blatantly against Native Irish people who just but we also have Polish people. Look, we have Polish people in Ireland as well who are also Catholic. So I mean, that's a first. Maybe they can stay. I think what I would like to see a solution is like say any anti-immigration party like the National Party, if they do come to power, I hope anyone who speaks out on this will come to power can, or if any of the parties wake up to this whole madness, they can just draw up a comprehensive list of who can stay and who should bloody get out of here, because they're just not worth the Irish people's salt. You know, well, I mean, I definitely think Polish people should stay. You know, because we have just because of the Catholic religion and all this sort of stuff. Yeah.
I think the native indigenous peoples of all nations should stay the majority. I mean, providing that they're not like 20,000 people spread over 10 million miles of ground, which is ridiculous. But if you have a reasonable native population and they've been there for thousands of years, which is the case of all the people in the British Isles, including the Irish, then obviously they should stay the majority people of those nations, because otherwise those nations don't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Which, of course, is what the globalists want.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said earlier on in the stream, I said I was talking there about George Soros. He's behind all this liberal madness. Like it's quite clear.
He's one of the people. He's one of the people.
One of the people, so, yeah. But there's others like Klaus Schwab, Klaus Schwab, Justin Trudeau, definitely Leo Varadkar as well. Who's,
Leo Varadkar. Isn't he some sort of gay
Indian
person? Yeah.
I'd probably say that a lot of this is because of the Tiger as well. The US State Department turned its eyes on Ireland during the sort of inception of huge amounts of American tech firms, European offices being stationed in Ireland.
Yep, and of course Biden is your typical plastic paddy. I mean,
oh yeah,
he's got no real feeling for Ireland. He doesn't know anything about Ireland.
No, he just uses it as a country.
If you saw that video where it's like the BBC asked Biden, "Do you want?" Hello, Mr. President, we're from the BBC, and he says, "BBC, I'm Irish," and so. Yeah, I mean, he's probably saying he probably doesn't mean it as much. He's not like JFK, where say JFK came to Ireland, and he back in 1963, and I actually went to the place in Ireland. It's a place called Wexford. That's where he went. That's where his ancestors hailed from, and he looked fondly on his Irish background very much. Whereas Biden, I think, is just more in it for a whole. The U.S. has to, be involved with everything that's going on in the world now. It's like they're the LGBT flag.
The U.S. sure seems to want to control everything that's happening in Europe for certain. Brian Borrow brings up a good point in the chat. And he's saying John J.O. Kelly, the leader of Sinn Féin in the 1930s, was a proto Franco type person.
I think I see it. Franco.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, I mean, I know that the early IRA were a bit fashy.
For sure.
I don't care about that, to be quite honest with you. But the modern guys are absolutely Marxists and globalists, which is like complete opposite, basically.
100%. The early IRA definitely did support. They were very conservative to begin with, and they. Even after independence in 1921, when the new Irish state was having a hard time at that stage, trying to develop, trying to develop itself and become this new state. There was a lot of political tensions. Yeah, there was a big left versus right, communism and fascism, as it was would have been perceived back then. Same like as in Spain under General Franco. Well, before Franco came to power, there was the Spanish Civil War, and of course the Irish played a big, massive part in that as well. Like there were some Irish who fought on the pro-Franco side. You had people like Owen O'Duffy, who was actually the leader of a political organization called the Blue Shirts. If you don't mind me saying this, in my view, I think they were real Irishmen, because like they were there to basically, defend free speech, and like they were under threat. Like they held meetings, and they were trying to stop those meetings from being. It's kind of like it's a bit like it's funny. History has a real funny way of repeating itself, and like it kind of, if you look at all these political meetings happening today, it would have in Ireland. It's like back in the 30s, like that same thing was going on as well. You had the IRA that were becoming openly communist, and like they had several people call for those people that supported the Anglo-Irish Treaty, which would have guaranteed independence from the British Empire, but as a dominion. So a lot of them would have seen those people who supported it as traitors. But in my view, I think that those people, like in the Blue Shirts, and in or they're also called the Army Comrades Association, but a lot of them went off to Spain to fight for Franco, like General Franco in the Spanish Civil War. And you also had, like, it was like the political realignments left and right were starting to make a major impact on the whole divide in Spain during the Civil War. So it was like I say, history is it has a very funny way of repeating itself.
I'm very nuanced on the Spanish Civil War, to the extent that I would have supported the Nationalists had I been around in those days, and not the bloody commies. But there we go. That's just me.
I remember reading in that Hilaire Belloc book, the one about the Jews, where I think near the beginning or in the introduction, he talks about the murder of Irish immigrants in Spain by the Republicans, but by the commies, and how that played some part in sort of the sparking off of that.
Well, I mean, the commies in Spain in the 1930s, they were murdering and raping nuns. They were
they were dysgenic mutants, every last one of them.
Yeah, they were killing priests. They were digging up dead bodies in cemeteries of saints and stuff like this. It was just totally insane, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe that's the future we have to look forward to be honest.
I must answer this question in the chat, by the way, or this statement in the chat. The Hardship Party says Ireland is also one of the few white countries who have no responsibility for colonisation. Could that be why they want the Irish identity to collapse as soon as possible? I don't think that's really. Well, maybe, but it's not really true.
They do the same with Sweden, though, as well, don't they?
Well, they do.
Like Sweden has no sort of basis in sort of transatlantic slavery or colonialism of any kind, but they still get peddled the same rhetoric as the rest of us, and quite a bit harder.
So Sweden had a couple of colonies in the West Indies and in West Africa, but not much.
No.
But Ireland, to be fair, back in the old days, before 1921, many Irish people played a great part in the British Empire, and I do mean a great part, not a bad part. So
I actually agree, even though I would, in terms of, you see, like I would describe myself very much, Aaron Duke, as being an Irish nationalist, but
sure,
but yeah, but an Irish nationalist, but who for some reason, also, you're right. You're actually right. A lot of Irish went to those places. In
Look,
what's now the Commonwealth.
I live in Australia. There's loads of Irish people in Australia.
Yeah, there you go.
And the vast majority of them did not come here as convicts. The vast majority of them came here as free settlers. And they also went to Canada, and they also went to New Zealand, and they also went to South Africa back in the day.
Yeah. Like I think I had one relative who went to South Africa, and back then as probably not as an Afrikaner, but like because when they talk about white in South Africa, like they're obviously talking about the Afrikaners, but it's much more. It's much more. You go in depth to that. Like
Thomas, I lived in South Africa for 15 years, from 1985 onwards, like when the old white government was in charge. And about 60% of white South Africans were Afrikaners, who are mostly Dutch, German, and a bit of Scandinavian, and also Huguenot French. Protestant French. But the 40% of white South Africans back then were English-speaking South Africans, and a lot of those guys were Irish. A lot of those guys were Irish, Scots, Welsh, not just English, and even American originally.
I think the blacks, or sorry, well, listen, I need to be Native Africans would want to, like, theirs is not so much like they're making it completely about like for example, you know, I think their resentment is primarily at the, you know, over white people in general than it is about the how can I say this, you know, than just bitterness about the past, where because of the government, and the South African government was you know, for me it's more of like a race card, I think, as usual. But
yeah, it's used as a bloody pathetic excuse. But yeah, I listen. Like I said, my mum was born in Ireland. And there were great Irish regiments in the British Army, like the Connaught Rangers, for example, and the Dublin Fusiliers, and
the Royal Irish Regiment, or the Ulster Defence Regiment, I think was the other one.
Absolutely right, mate. I think all of these were fine. Oh, hello, we're going to get Chris. Good day, Chris. How you going, mate?
I'm good. What are you talking about?
Oh, well, we're having a pretty big Irish thing today because we've got two good Irishmen on the stream, and I'm just about to ask Tristan to come in because he's been really patient, waiting to get his stuff in, and then I'll ask you. So Tristan, I guess you would quite largely agree with what Thomas has been saying, but did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up? Or just continue what we've been talking about?
Well, first of all, is my mic all right? Just to make sure.
You need to be a little bit louder, mate. Can you increase your volume just a bit?
Is any louder now?
Yeah, that's much better, mate. Carry on.
Right. So, first of all, there's been quite a lot going on in the past month here in Northern Ireland. Such as the posters going up in Belfast and current gang violence going on in the Newton Ards Road area of Belfast over the sea border, and, you know, a resurgence in, you know, paramilitarism in Northern Ireland over the sea border issue. But it's kind of old news, and it didn't really develop into anything besides, you know, a few people getting arrested and a few new people being put in charge. But I would like to say, because I was listening to that conversation, and I would like to say about Sinn Féin, that a lot of, as I see, especially on Twitter and online, a lot of the Irish right, even though Sinn Féin is clearly a leftist globalist party and always has been, It's never really been a proper nationalistic party ever since the Americans really took charge back when De Valera took charge of the whole entire nationalist end of politics in republicanism, especially in the south of Ireland. Although even though they are clearly the Globalist Party, a lot of Republicans, especially in Northern Ireland, will still vote for Sinn Féin, even though Sinn Féin is currently opening up mosques and have been funding up, bringing in refugees and opening up mosques across the whole entire island for like the past 5 years now. Just because Sinn Féin gives the promise of a united Ireland, which in reality their proposal for a united Ireland is completely, it's not possible. And if they did do it, it would lead to the most disunited state you could have possibly imagined, with a four-way parliament, because currently Ireland has a three-way parliament due to all three major parties tying, and it is projected that Unionists would make up the same amount of vote as Fianna Gael and Fianna Fáil at the moment. It has been quite baffling for the past month. What's been going on, especially with the Nationalist Party rally in Fermanagh, which a lot of my family, it's my main family's home county. Majority of my family lived there, and majority of my family's buried there. A bunch of Antifa communists, which are connected to groups like Ireland Against Imperialism, which back up, ironically enough, imperialist organizations such as the INLA, which support a military campaign to expand Ireland's border into the north, which is imperialism by definition. They stormed the place with hammers and injured quite a few people for, peacefully having a wee meeting in Fermanagh. And,
Sorry, Tristan, is this the meeting that Thomas was talking about earlier?
Yeah.
Hammers, you say?
Yeah. I think it was 2 people were detained, and they were carrying hammers, and that's what was used to injure the members at the meeting. From my understanding, that's what the PSNI released. You have these organizations which are completely, like, ideologically, they're not willing to hear out anybody. Like, if you all say to them, like, oh, if you want a united Ireland, you'll have to allow a unionist voice, they'll say no, because the unionists are just English Protestant settlers and they need to be, shipped away because they have a different view from us. And,
Well, to be fair, even if you were to follow that logic, which is not totally true anyway, because there has been, over the centuries now, there's been a good deal of interbreeding, shall we say. You'd have to say English and Scottish Protestants, not just English, but,
Well, I would be very shocked if any person in Ireland at this point, after like the 2,000 years worth of mixing, or even before that we were mixing with the other island, I would be very shocked to find somebody with a 100% Irish DNA.
I've looked into this a little bit, Tristan, and English, Scottish, Welsh, and both Northern and Southern Irish DNA is like really, really close now. There's not very big differences.
Okay. I would like to also say, because I was watching Thomas's Instagram live stream the other day, and I was talking to him, and I was sort of thinking, I've been thinking about this for like the past few days, like about the National Party, because Thomas had put on a story earlier a few weeks back about it, and it got me really thinking of why a party like that really cannot succeed, and why Ireland nationalist movements won't succeed as their current dogma is. because a lot of these nationalist movements which pop up in Ireland, like the Split Away Party and onto away from Sinn Féin and the National Party and the Irish Freedom Party. The Irish Freedom Party probably being the most successful one out of all of them, because they were actually willing to talk to other nationalists from the other side of the political spectrum and put aside the banner and the flag. And that, like the Nationalist Party, they're very much so Republican nationalists, and they would not be willing to talk to a DUP man, and they wouldn't be willing to talk to somebody that isn't fully on board with the Republic. It is what will end up dooming the sovereign nationalist movements from ever being able to attempt to leave the EU or to slow down immigration, because if Ireland has any chance to do that, it would be to work with nationalist movements within Britain and within Northern Ireland to get the whole.
John McNamara in the chat, Tristan, is saying, isn't this the argument the Libs make for immigration, though? Just saying, I don't think it is. I do think that Irish nationalists and nationalists in Northern Ireland and nationalists in Britain could actually make a common cause. Now, we've had like hundreds of years of pretty fucked up history between us, but we could make a common cause today.
Yeah, just so I can come in there, that's kind of interesting. You were, as Tristan said there, like, it's got me thinking about this as well. Now, Tristan, you are right. The National Party are just basically, in my view, the National Party are Sinn Féin, but just right wing. So they have a different political alignment, but they still are. They would still, accurately portray themselves as just very, very national, very separate. The separatist version of nationalism, as is advocated by the SNP in Scotland and then Plaid Cymru in Wales, but because I am trying to make some sort of common ground, I guess, as a nationalist, between nationalism, Irish nationalism, and Irish unionism, because there is in some ways we've got a lot in common in terms of the people.
Agreed.
No, disavow.
No. I listen. I think what you're doing there, Armin, is you're looking at Irish nationalism like when I was serving the British Army, and Pyro were trying to murder us all, because we were just trying to keep the peace, and that is absolutely the truth. That's all we were trying to do. In fact, when we first arrived there in the 1960s, it was the Northern Irish Catholics who welcomed the British Army. Yeah. You can believe what you want, mate. You weren't there. I was. I do think that these days, today in 2023, we have bigger enemies than each other.
Yeah.
Like, the British English Irish thing is pretty fucking minor compared, excuse my language, guys, compared to the vast mass immigration that wants to destroy all of us.
Yes, but you're still better off as a movement if you've got lots of largely disunited sort of individual nodes than you are if you've got one giant intertwined network that they can sniff out.
Look, I see what you're saying, Alan. Yeah, absolutely, and that one.
I mean, you're right about the whole English and Irish history thing. Like, it doesn't. Like obviously any movement kind of needs some young people in it, some young energy, and none of those young people really care about this stuff. So you can kind of just step over the whole thing anyway. But I just think, I don't know. I think it needs to be handled with care. I think you don't need to have any sort of big formal alliances. You just need to know that you can sort of nod to each other. That there's,
Oh
there's
yeah,
sort of an
yeah.
uninformed.
That's all I'm saying, Alan. I'm
Yeah.
not suggesting
I
that
say-
we are greatly politically tied.
I say,
just think we should be allies, not enemies.
I say we just blame the French for all these problems between the English and the Irish. Anyway, let's face it, it was the fucking Normans. It wasn't us.
Yeah.
What I will say, right, is think about it for a second. How much more better would have that nationalist meeting / rally in North Fermanagh would have been if they had invited along a bunch of unionist support, which in North Fermanagh there's a bunch of it. If they had invited some unionists along, how much more better would have it been if it was nationalist unionists and the National Party from the South coming up to have this big meeting and talking on the issues that is because the thing is, currently the EU is holding Northern Ireland at gunpoint. They are forcing us to stay in, and Ireland is being forced to stay in financially. We are both in the same struggle here currently, and all I'm saying, it needs to be a unified nationalist movement on both sides.
I agree.
I do think that, you know, there are bigger reasons for English and British nationalists and Northern Irish nationalists to be allies with the Republic of Ireland nationalists than to be enemies at the moment. They really are. We face a much bigger threat.
What I will say also to add in before anyone gets confused, Sinn Féin aren't nationalists, they're separationists. You can be a British unionist and still be a nationalist. You know, it's like the BNP, you know, they're nationalists. But I'll let Thomas go on because he was about to say something like.
Thomas, carry on, man.
No. I'm look. I think I've done far too much talking. I'll just let whoever wants to jump in there and say anything that I think I've been speaking too much.
Sorry, mate. No worries. You must come back in a minute. Like you've been excellent so far, mate. Honestly, really good. I just wanted to say to Chris, who's been a regular on our streams for a while now.
Yes.
And Chris mainly, to be honest, not me, but mostly Chris is working on our next episode on Australian history is going to be about the Irish in Australia. And so I think this stream might be quite useful to you, Chris, from that point of view, for a little bit of like modern background, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm happy to sort of listen to a bit more because I only just sort of popped in, so I missed all the conversation. Sorry.
No, that's all right. Did you have any particular thing you wanted to bring up this week, Chris?
I didn't catch your Sargon.
All right. Well, this kind of relates to what we're talking about, I suppose, a bit, because Sargon was saying on a stream. I can't remember who it was with now. I think it was a stream that he invaded. It was one of AA's streams that he invades from time to time, and for reasons best known to AA, he lets him take them over.
Chris was there. He was a spy, if I'm thinking of the right one.
Oh, yeah, actually, I think you were, mate. Yeah, I think you were on it. And Chris is a good guest on the stream because he's got an infectious laugh and makes some good points. But and so Sargon came on there and he said, I don't care if Scotland breaks away from England or Northern Ireland breaks away from England or Wales breaks away from England. I don't care if England's got no influence whatsoever in the world. I don't care if it's just England. And like, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, so if England becomes like a 2.5 to 3 times more powerful Belgium, which is what England would be, in what way, shape, or form can England exert any influence on anything or be independent in any real way? Like, the only countries that could really become independent in the EU, for example, Italy could, Germany could, France could.
Switzerland.
Well, Switzerland's not officially in the EU, but yeah,
Yeah,
all right.
exactly. Well, this is what I was about to say. Is Switzerland seems to be doing okay. How much global influence does Switzerland have other than people's money getting parked there?
Well, it's got, well, I was just going to say it has a hell of a lot of people's money being parked there, and it's also right in the middle of Europe, surrounded by mountains, very hard to invade.
Well, apparently, so is being surrounded by an ocean, but they still get fucking invaded, don't you?
Well, you do these days, of course, when your navy's not allowed to sink the enemy. But
doesn't happen in Australia, though. We get all our boat people.
Yeah, well,
we catch them and send them back.
All right, I don't know what you're going to say about this, Chris, but I actually thought John Howard's one good policy was the offshore thing.
Yeah. Also, Tony Abbott's.
It was John Howard and Tony Abbott, absolutely correct. But I mean, like, basically anyone trying to come to Australia by boat didn't ever get to Australia. They were sent to some offshore island.
Yep.
And they had nurseries and playgrounds and hospitals and doctors. But
no, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? It was basically a giant concentration camp, Duke. Didn't you hear what the news was telling?
According to the Western MSN, but not in actual fact. Yeah. But
Christmas Island was just a huge, an Auschwitz
literally
on the ocean.
Yeah.
It was literally Auschwitz, and they burnt people every evening. But no, actually, they didn't. They just didn't arrive in Australia.
Once they finished burning all their copies of the Quran, they started throwing all the immigrants on the fire too.
Yep, absolutely. But no, they didn't. But I mean, of course they didn't. It was Australia. But basically, they had all the stuff they needed there for and children, even though most of the people coming across weren't women and children. And they never got to Australia. And if they did, you'd be there like 9 months before you arrived in Australia. If you were very lucky.
It fucking pissed me off how they were talking about sort of the conditions that they had in those encampments, because I actually used to work at an immigration detention center in South Australia, doing security there. And it was basically exactly the same sort of setup. It would have all been run through Serco. Same with Christmas Island and Nauru and all them. They all would have been through Serco. And they are fucking pampered like you would not believe. They're given everything times two. And a lot of the times
color televisions.
And a lot of the times they'll try to scam extra stuff out of the people supplying all the like the clothes and toys and stuff. The same woman will like change her headdress and go in the same day and pretend to be someone else. It's like, what are you talking about? We've already given you 5 pairs of shoes. No, you've given me none. It's fuck. Like, they were just a whole lot of them, because all of them were illegally trying to enter the country. So it's like, it's the same problem as the UK. Like, the people that are crossing illegally, it's like, you're already a criminal as soon as you step foot on the ground. Like, and they just behave like that. Like, they behave like the criminals that they are. It's just like, no, fuck you. Get out of my country.
You need to be the guy with the stamps that stamps the paperwork declined or approved, not just just let that approved stamp just run completely dry.
Look, guys, you can laugh at me if you like, but I've been saying this for over a year now, that Britain has the perfect place to send all these people. Send them to Ascension Island. Ascension Island in the middle of the South Atlantic. It's got a nice climate. It's volcanic and pretty barren. It's a military base, partly British, partly American. There's no civilians there whatsoever. Set up big camps there, and everyone who arrives from France gets sent there. And they ought to know, or they will learn, like, eventually you're going to spend at least 6 to 9 months on this place before you've got any chance going to the UK, and 3/4 of you are going to get sent home. And I guarantee all those small boat crossings would stop. That is what Howard and as Chris said, the other dude, set up in Australia. It's the only way to stop it. And Britain could do that because Ascension is a British island. It's one of the 14 British colonies still scattered around the world.
But I mean, this kind of goes into, I mean, because you need to gain power, obviously, to be able to do something like that. And if you do, it's the easiest thing in the world to do. But you know, you were saying about like England being, to go back to the main point that this diverts off of. You know, you were saying about England becoming sort of you know, breaking away from Britain essentially,
and
leaving
being
Scotland and Wales
tiny
their
and
devices.
useless and totally being bullied by everybody else. Yeah.
I mean, to an extent, because obviously Chris brought up Switzerland. I mean, I love Switzerland. I've been there a bunch of times. Switzerland, with its tiny population and its canton system, actually has a much easier job of repelling these sorts of policies. And actually,
100,
just in the last 2 weeks, Switzerland has actually brought in immigration control under the guise of climate change policy. But England would still actually be pretty big, even if you ejected Scotland and Wales. So it wouldn't give us any benefits on that front, I don't think.
It would just make us. It would just make us weaker than we are
possibly,
now.
yeah.
Well,
I mean, on
not
one
even-
hand, you
not
wouldn't
even
have
possibly, but
on one hand, you know, there is an extent to which Wales and Scotland actually kind of cost us more than we get.
oh
out
yeah,
of it.
no. Scotland and Wales cost England money. They absolutely do. But on the other hand, they also provide us with a lot of our best servicemen. And don't let us forget, the last time there was a referendum in Scotland, the canny Scots rejected it.
Not by a particularly big margin, but then it wasn't as if the unionist side was particularly very effective in there.
No, but they still rejected it. If Scotland did break away in a referendum, it would be by like 3% or something like that.
I mean, could you imagine how big that unionist vote would be in Scotland if it was actually if the unionist position was actually headed by someone who was in the least bit nationalistic and actually
and said we're not going to fill Glasgow and Edinburgh with like third world people. Yeah, I'm 100%.
Because this is something that the SNP run into all the time. Is they're constantly trying to thread this knot where they've got like their base of sort of independence voters are people that are actually quite socially right wing, but economically left wing, and they try to pretend as if their base are actually these gormless shit libs that are socially left wing, and they always have trouble.
Scotland's extremely culturally conservative on the whole. Especially outside the couple of big cities.
I mean, in some instances, because immigration isn't as big of an issue for them because they just don't deal with it on the same scale that England does. So it's kind of out of sight, out of mind to them, at least for now.
But if Scotland became independent and did rejoin the EU, which is dubious because of how indebted Scotland would be, but if they did, all of a sudden Scotland would get like the same scale of immigration that England or Britain at the moment gets as a whole, which is what Thomas and Tristan have been talking about is happening in the Republic of Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like ethnic demographics going to school, right, between Scotland or all of Britain, the English and Welsh number is skewed by 8% if you include Scotland into it. Just to show how much of an ethno state Scotland is. You know, and so it is kind of a funny dichotomy the SNP find themselves in, where they try to sort of balance these two sides. But
I mean, if you go outside Edinburgh and Glasgow in Scotland, and you go north, like into the Highlands, the Scotland has no immigrants basically. I mean, I'm sure they have a handful, but basically they don't have any because most of them don't want to live there because it snows and it's really beautiful. It's isolated and everyone's Scottish, so
they've got a few communities, but they're people that they've sort of bust in. I remember there was a whole documentary actually on the BBC. They were trying to play it off as a good thing. I can't remember the name of the town. It's in the Highlands though, and they've got like a sizable little Syrian community up there. of all these refugees that they sort of bust out there. And they must have got off that bus and be like, what the fuck have we gotten ourselves into?
Yeah, it's not exactly Syrian weather, I gotta say.
No,
But,
I mean, I love the Highlands. I've been up there a bunch of times. You recommended
it's one
that
of the
book,
most beautiful places in the whole world, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, because you recommended me that book, didn't you, on Culloden?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know much about the glory. It's my biggest weak point on British history is the Glorious Revolution. But I had to go up to Inverness on a business trip, and these two young women from the place where I was having to go sort of give me a lift back to the hotel, and they
Cool.
even though it was the middle of January, right, it was pitch black, and they were like, no, you've got to see the Culloden battlefield. They took me up to this field with these rocks in complete darkness at like 6:30 in the evening.
Have you been to Fort George?
No, I haven't.
And the next time you go to Scotland, go to Fort George. It's the best artillery fort, the best 18th century artillery fort in the whole. Well, it's one of the best in the whole world, but it's certainly the best in Britain.
Yeah,
really great place. Go and visit it, man. And it's also got one of the Highland Regiment museums in it, and it's cool. It's just so cool. It's lovely. But go in the summer.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, Chris, we interrupted you, mate.
I didn't say anything.
No, I just thought you were making because I know like I said earlier, around part 3 of the Australian history stream, it's going to be about Irish settlers or Irish people in Australia, I think, because it's your stream, not mine, really.
It'll be tangentially about that, but I was going to focus on Tasmania, but within that, there is a lot of Irish sort of Australian law in it. I was actually just going through some of the stories that we are actually all told. One of the famous ones, I think they even made a movie about it. Alexander Pierce, the escaped convict that ate all his mates.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, I remember that.
Alexander Pierce, the cannibal, who he escaped Macquarie Harbour, which is on the west coast of Tasmania, and that was considered the coldest and most horrible. What would you call it? Convict prison thing. And he escaped with 7 of his mates, or 7 other convicts that were all working with him in a saw pit. They jumped in a boat and they went south a little bit and then hopped off, destroyed the boat, and then started wandering inland to go to the east coast to go to Hobart or the Derwent. And on the way, they slowly ate one another. Like they killed the first guy, ate him, and then killed the next guy, ate him, and then by the time that Alexander Pierce got to Hobart, he had eaten all of them.
God.
And he was harbored by a couple of convicts for a few months because they always had sympathy. Like they had convicts working as indentured laborers for farmers and stuff like that. And they always had sympathy for people that escaped.
Loads of ex-convicts, of course.
Yep, of course. But eventually he was caught and sent straight back to Macquarie Harbour. And then 10 months later, he one of the younger convicts that was there working with him, because he had a legendary status in Macquarie Harbour by that point about his escape and his tall tale of eating all his friends. They didn't believe him, but like the authorities didn't believe his story that he ate everybody. Like they just he was just covering for them, and they were still on the loose, but he actually did eat them. And so they were like, well, you're going to stay in Macquarie Harbour then. And then, one of these younger convicts that was working with him was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Can you take me out of here? Can you get me out of here? Well, let's escape. And they escaped. And then within a day, Alexander ate the other guy. He just ate him straight away.
He basically became a cannibal.
Yeah, because he pissed him off. The young kid pissed him off on the way out. So he's like, fuck it, I'm going to kill this kid and I'll just eat him.
What a nice man.
And then got caught 2 days later and sent straight back again.
What do you know what happened to him in the end, Chris?
He didn't live much longer. He was probably hung, yeah. He was probably sent to Hobart.
He probably deserved it, actually, after eating 8 people. But, I mean,
Yeah. Well, what are you going to do? Yeah, once you get a taste of it. Yum, yum.
I don't know, man. I'd like the idea to me is horrifying, but I wouldn't even eat a dog, never known a person.
Did he leave quite a lot? Because that's a lot of poundage of meat. You know?
all they used to do was they would cut the bicep and a bit of the thigh, because as he said, that was the tastiest part.
Oh God!
So yeah, they'd cut it into strips and just like stuff it in their pocket and walk around with it and just nibble on it as they get hungry. Yeah, basically.
Yeah. As God's own prototype says in the chat, long pig, which is what it was called by the assorted Pacific Islanders and Torres Strait Islanders who used to do that stuff.
Mm. So and Alexander Pierce, I think he was an Irishman. Let me just double check that. There was quite a few. Yeah, he was Irish, and then there were the other, because most of the bush rangers in Tasmania were Irish.
Well, I mean, Ned Kelly was Irish, for God's sake, but I mean, Ned Kelly's family didn't arrive as convicts; they arrived as free settlers. And Ned Kelly, as a young boy, like a teenager, he got some sort of award for saving someone from drowning.
Funny how all the thorns in the side of the British were all these Irish fucking prisoners. They're fucking troublemakers. Because they were like, a lot of them that was sent over were like political dissidents. I mean, there was a huge portion of them were actual criminals. But yeah, you're sending a lot of very, very fired up, angry, politically dissident, like radicalists to a colony of, surrounded by people that they hate. And because the colonial office is like, look, you guys got to really fucking suppress these guys because they're very active and they radicalize people. And so, of course, as soon as they arrive, they just oppress the living fuck out of them and, whip them to within an inch of their lives and keep them in chains.
All right, hang on, Chris. I've got to, like, given my mother was Irish, I've got to, like, re-center this stream a little bit. in that you have to understand that Australia was basically founded in 1788, and of course the French Revolution broke out in 1797. So obviously a lot of Irish people who got caught up in the French Revolutionary thing got sent to Australia. And like the French Revolutionary thing was overwhelmingly evil, in my honest opinion. But you've got to realize that.
Yeah, of course.
And the vast majority of Irish people who settled in Australia were not convicts. They were free settlers who just said, "Okay, we're going to move to Australia because we might strike gold, or we might do really well on a farm and." New chance,
Yeah, that was later in the period, but the first 20, 30 years, up until 1810, 1820 sort of thing, the only really Irish people that were coming there were convicts, political.
For the first 20 years,
political prisoners who tried to ally with the French. So,
and you got to do something with those guys, and you could argue that, like,
crush them.
I'm joking. No, but you could argue, Chris, that not killing them, not executing them, and sending them to Australia was like not quite so bad, really.
I don't know, not for some of the treatment that some of them got.
Rather than killing them, you mean?
Well, because whenever there was like any sort of murmurings of a possible mutiny or uprising from the Irish and the convicts. The ones that were suspected of orchestrating it or anyone that might be involved, they would just get lashed and lashed and lashed until they basically died, trying to get a confession out of them. A lot of them were flogged to death.
Felt they had to do because
exactly
if a revolt broke out, there was no help coming, and there were so few people to put it down when it happened. They had to act quick and hard.
And the sturdy Irish that had the nationalist fire inside them. A lot of them, refused to talk anyway. Even if they knew anything, they never ever snitched. Well, most of them didn't.
Based, actually, to be honest.
It is. They were like, you're not going to get anything out of me. You might as well kill me.
But you've also got to look at contemporary stuff. Like if you were any sort of royalist in France at that stage, and you could be like even like a cheeky babe at 21, they would just behead you.
Mm-hmm.
Or they would put you in barges on the Seine and sink them so you all drowned.
Yeah.
So you like, all right, yeah, you can say, oh, the Brits weren't all that nice. No, sure, okay, agreed. But relative to the French revolutionaries,
yeah, well, the
sure
other
we
problem,
were that bad.
It's a bit more cynical than that though, because I think a lot of them that a lot of the times they didn't actually ever execute them because they didn't want to make martyrs out of them. They wanted them to suffer and not be martyrs. And that's like, that's even worse. That's proper like oppression. That's amazing.
Maybe I'm not sure I totally agree with you on that one, Chris. But yeah, like dead is dead, to be honest.
It is, but nothing like a martyr to fire up the base.
Yeah, but if you notice, like people like Stalin, they didn't like. Well, I mean, they did quite often, like really mistreat people a lot. But like, if you were considered even slightly an enemy of the state, you just got executed. You're dead. So there's that. But I mean, yeah, I see where you're coming from, but I just think go back to the like 1790s, 1800. The Brits weren't that bad.
No.
Relative to everybody else in the world, they weren't that bad, to be honest.
No.
And of course, the Royal Marines, who started off being the guys who guarded all the prisoners in Australia, fucking hated it because they were the Royal Navy sea soldiers and like they were an active service unit, didn't really want to be here.
No one
formed the Rumgot.
Yeah, no one was fitted out or ill. They're all ill-equipped to set up a colony in a place like that. None of them were trained for it. None of them knew what the fuck to do. Yeah, basically, as soon as everyone got there, they all wanted to leave. It was just like it was an imperative. But you got to remember too that the reason there was the cruelty that there was because the places that were set up to do that were specifically to punish and sort of suppress anything from breaking the colony down, like because it was so tenuous the whole time. So you had to control it and you had to keep everyone in line, otherwise it would all crumble. So they had to be as like draconian and militant as they were, and because it was such a hard place to live in, like everyone, it was just a place of suffering at that time. It was just pure suffering for like the first 5 to 10 years. So, and even after that, like for indentured labor, or even not indentured labor, like the ones that would get emancipated, if they were unskilled, they would essentially just continue being slaves anyway. They worked for fuck all pay, and they had to work 12 hours a day in the blistering summer heat of Australia when they're
but they got better. They got better pay, Chris, than labourers in England did because labour was
and then of course, like there's a lot of stories of because there was so much poverty in England at the time and everyone was getting driven into the city centres away from the rural areas. And there was just a lot of idle people with no work because industrialisation had basically rendered half the population, useless. Yeah. So you had all this poverty and all this hunger. So that, petty theft was, they were transported for petty theft. It happened a lot. But a lot of the cases that if they were transported over, a lot of them were, if they were lucky enough to be like a convict labourer for a good farmer who treated them well, often they'd be fed really well. There's people writing letters back saying, I'm getting fed 3 times a day and I've got as much rum and ale as I want. And, they feed me cakes and fucking, they don't make me work too hard and they're all very good to me and I sleep in the house. And it's like compared to their home back in England where they never ate and, they had to steal to survive. So, yeah. It's very
and then
mixed.
After whatever number of years, they were released and could do
Started
what
their
they
own
like.
thing.
Yeah. This is the thing which is wrong about the Australian founding story, is that like the Australian founding story is overwhelmingly about convicts, but like the vast majority of modern Australians and the vast majority of modern Anglo-Celtic Australians weren't the descendants of convicts. They were the descendants of free settlers, because of course gold was found in Australia, and all of a sudden a lot of people wanted to come here.
Mm.
Because if you were bloody lucky, and you had to be bloody lucky, of course, you could become very, very rich very, very quickly. I mean, there are famous pictures of like the world's biggest gold nugget, which is like, I don't know, 2/3 the size of a human, Chris, would you say?
Something like that.
Yeah,
the one that I'm
some
thinking
dude
of, yeah.
found that. Some dude found it. I mean, you know.
Well, they still made movies on it. What's that movie? I think it's literally just called Gold, isn't it?
There's
with,
that one.
It's got that young fucking pretty boy Zac Efron in it. Yeah, it's literally centered in Australia. It's based in Australia, that movie, but it's like Australia in the future, where there's just like in the middle of the desert, there's Chinese and Arabic on the side, on the road signs, and everyone's basically just there to get gold. So they go out there and they find that enormous nugget of gold.
But if you look in 19th century photographs, check it up on Google or like DuckDuckGo or something. You can see an Aussie dude standing next to a gold nugget, which is 2/3 the size of him. And he just found it. I mean, you know, for fuck's sake. So, like, by that stage, there were two things that stopped transportation. One was that because of the gold rushes in Australia, like a lot of people wanted to suddenly go to Australia. And the other thing was that the free settlers didn't want it anymore.
Mm.
Like in Western Australia, for example, they just didn't want convicts anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, they're becoming a problem more than a solution, because by that point it was already an established society, you know, with free people producing quite easily. They didn't need slave labor, convict labor. So, and the convicts were generally a lot harder to deal with by that point, because they were only sending the worst of the worst, and they didn't want them anymore. They're like, no, we don't want to be a prison colony anymore. Go away.
But I still think, Chris, I don't know if you agree with this, but I still think one reason Australian rhyming slang is so close to Cockney rhyming slang is because of the number of prisoners from London who got sent to Australia in the early days.
That, like, the majority of them were sent from London, because I mean that was where a lot of them were held in prison hulks anyway. But yeah, it's because everyone was forced into the city.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Australia's history is much more complicated than people think it is. But it's like, but you have to understand that by the 1840s, which was like, I don't know, what, 60 years after Australia, 60, 70 years after Australia was first settled, suddenly they started finding gold in all sorts of places.
Yeah.
And that is what really changed the trajectory for Australia. And even to this day, if you go to Melbourne, which is a shit city in terms of being absolutely lefty and nasty and crap and gay, but it's got great, lovely, brilliant 19th century buildings all over it, because they found gold in Victoria. And so Melbourne became one of the richest cities in the British Empire quite quickly.
Yep.
But it's got great, lovely 19th century buildings. And go to Melbourne Zoo if you ever come to Australia and Melbourne. Melbourne Zoo is almost a copy of London Zoo. But it's equally got much better these days than it used to be. It's a good zoo. But yeah, absolutely. Australian history is pretty complicated in many respects.
Indeed, and it was entangled in a very big geopolitical thing for the first century of it. So it wasn't as simple as just dumping prisoners. There was a lot going on. But yeah.
The Laureate says, wasn't rhyming slang originally a code spoken by criminals? It was in case they were overheard when planning crimes.
Go to the Fagin School for Boy Thieves.
Yeah, there is some truth in that. But like, as I was trying to say to Chris earlier, and I'm sure he agrees, is that there's a lot of commonality between Australian rhyming slang. Like Australians will call American septic tanks, i.e. Yanks, and British rhyming slang. There's loads of stuff which is very similar. But it came from the fact that, as Chris said, like a huge number of the original convicts sent to Australia came from London. What a surprise, because it was the biggest city in the world at that stage. But, you know,
just regarding that super chat, there was an old English journalist. I think it's like, you know, the mid 1800s, Henry Mayhew. You might have heard of him.
Mm-hmm.
He did a lot of deep diving and stuff into the criminal underground in London. Broke down all of their terminologies and all the lingo, broke it all down. It's like an encyclopedia of all these different words and slangs and stuff like that, which was, yeah, most of it was code. Because there was as much much of a criminal syndicate, like a network of criminals. There was just as much as that as there were police and, you know, the respectables in quotes. And it worked the same way as what most sort of criminal undergrounds do, which is like, you'll have a higher status the more times you've been convicted. So there was an incentive system to be more criminal than anyone else, as there was an incentive system on the other end of that, which is to be the most respectable and be the most upstanding citizen. So there was like this twin mirror image society happening in London, and the underground was way bigger than what people actually expected. Like it was up to maybe even 30 or 40% of the population was involved in indirectly or directly with some sort of criminal activity.
Especially the New South Wales Rum Corps, they certainly were.
Indeed. Yep. Exported that criminal. Yeah, well, some of the emancipated convicts that got sent back to England would go back to Australia to be in the Rum Corps.
Yep. Also the Rum Corps originally wanted Australia to have its own aristocracy.
Yes.
They wanted lords and ladies and all this kind of stuff, and the British, thankfully, turned around and said, "No, that ain't gonna happen." But like the guy who brought over what's that famous sheep in Australia, Chris? From Spain, I believe.
The famous what? Sorry.
The famous sheep that
I wouldn't know.
Absolutely vital to Australian history. That I think came from Spain originally. Was brought over by one of the Rum Corps guys who became a huge squatter. The Merino, thank you, Bilboa in the chat. The Merino sheep, which came from Spain, which of course Spain's a pretty dry kind of country, so they did really well in Australia, which is the same sort of place. And that was brought over by one of the real top officers in the Rum Corps, who wanted, like Australian lord, he wanted to become an Australian lord. Fortunately, wasn't allowed to, because they weren't good guys, the Rum Corps, I gotta say. Like, the Royal Marines just wanted to fuck off. They didn't want to guard convicts on the far side of the world. That wasn't what they were for. The officers didn't like it. The men didn't really like it. They were fighting unit. So they formed the New South Wales Corps, which quickly became known as the Rum Corps, because for quite a few years of the early history of Australia, the main unit of currency was alcohol, and that main unit of currency was rum, which was or grog, which was a mixture of rum and water. And even to this very day, and I think Chris will agree with me, in Australia, you don't talk about booze, you talk about grog.
Mm.
And that's why. It's because, like, the early years of Australia, your main currency was like grog, a mixture of rum and water, basically, which you got off every ship that arrived in the harbour.
I like what Bilbo says there. Now we have the New South Wales Speed Camera Corps instead. Very true.
Yeah, they're probably even worse, to be honest.
They fucking are.
They probably are. Even
make a lot more money than the Rum Corps did. Fucking tell you
I
that
don't know
right now.
about that. I'm not sure about that, but yeah.
Oh, come on. They've raked in so much money. New South Wales, like, I think they make hundreds of millions in revenue from police fines and stuff, guaranteed.
Yeah, no.
How do you think they afford to pay for all their very expensive, very advanced roads? Super clean, super wide, everything's super tidy. It's a very expensive road system they have there. They're obsessed with roads there. But yeah, they have to pay for it somehow.
I've never lived in Sydney, I have to say. I've lived on the Central Coast. But which was nice.
Beg
your pardon?
Aren't the fines down there like really expensive?
Yes. New South Wales especially.
Yeah, I mean,
everything is expensive in Australia.
We get taxed. We get taxed out the arsehole here. That's fucked.
Yeah. Anyway, on that note, I will have to leave you guys. So it's been a good stream though. But have a good night all.
Ataman, thank you very much for joining. Well.
Yep, you too. Good night.
Do everyone go and check out Bowden Bomber, which I think is Ataman's channel on YouTube. All right, gents. We've been going 2 hours. Final thoughts, please.
What's going on with Sinn Féin?
Well, just to ask about Australia, Iron Duke. I'm actually considering about going over there on a work visa, and like what is it? The immigration in Australia is it as strict as they say? Like, because I know it's like points. Yeah.
Is Thomas? Is that you? Speak.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. It's me.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna pass you over to Chris, who is I'm a Pommy who lives in Australia. I'm going to pass you over to Chris, who will give you the actual real info.
Okay, sure.
I'm not as super up to date to it as I was a few years ago, but I mean, most people coming from Britain won't really have much of a problem getting citizenship here. It does take a long time. It's just a time thing. You got to jump through hoops. Provide all you and because most immigration it's like departments bureaucratic nightmares, so it's extremely inefficient. Takes a long time for stuff to get processed, but I mean, as long as you're not an active criminal, you won't have much problem getting in here. It's mainly people that come from people that aren't in the Commonwealth. So the Commonwealth network is still sort of there. The Commonwealth Foundation is still sort of there. They were considering doing a corridor. We've talked about it a fair bit before. They were trying to open a corridor between basically the old Commonwealth nations. So like, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Britain would just have like sort of an open immigration kind of network. But with that comes the problem of, well, you have all of these unfriendly people living in Britain that we don't want, such as all of your foreigners. So that would pose a big problem. So I don't know if they're going to carry on with that. I'm not sure. Since we had a government change, that may now stop because now we're under a Labor government. I feel like they're probably not going to like that idea.
Yeah. That's that guy Anthony Albanese. I think that's his name, isn't it? Yeah,
Anthony Albanese. Yeah,
Albanese. Yeah, and like in certain what would be the best what would be a good place to go to Melbourne or Perth, like because I know my parents both went to Australia, and my dad I think was in Darwin, I think is his name. But like yeah,
it's very hot and wet there. I mean, Duke's a little bit better traveled than I am in Australia. I mean, I'm biased with the place that I live in now. I'm in Cairns, tropical North Queensland. I'm biased because I just love the lifestyle here. It's like 15 years in the past. It's extremely green. It's surrounded by mountains.
Yeah.
So I'd suggest here a lot of Poms come here. A lot of Irish, a lot of English come here, and they do quite well. It's a lot easier.
Cairns is nice. Cairns is nice,
and it's easier to start.
My dad went to Cairns.
Yeah, and it's got a sort of a growing
Cairns
population,
nice.
and it's a bit easier to start a business here than say somewhere like Melbourne or Sydney.
Darwin ain't bad. Darwin ain't bad.
I've never been.
Yeah, I tell you what, Chris. When I first went to the Northern Territory in 2001, it still had a little bit of a frontier vibe. It really still did have that. Like, it's not just because like all over, like outback Australia and top end Australia, there's not many big towns. So
just be aware that Northern Territory is not friendly to vaccine dissidents.
Yeah, no,
extremely not friendly.
Obviously, I knew that place in 2001, long before the China virus. But yeah, I liked Darwin. I like Northern Territory actually because, like I said, back in those days, I don't think it's probably any more true, but like back then, it still did have a bit of a frontier vibe, because it was a territory, not a state. There were large bits of it which were still just basically only Aboriginal unless you got a permit, which I think is still true. But yeah, but I did like it actually. I thought, hang on, this is like my girl, who was like an Aussie chick from the north central coast in New South Wales originally. She even liked it because she thought, hang on, this is a bit different with the rest of Australia,
Tim Arminius says Australia would be fine if it wasn't run by the city retards. Very true. I mean, especially when considering rural Australia. I mean, rural Australia is like the rural life of Australia is infinitely bigger than the city life. I mean, the cities take up a small portion of the coast, but you've got these cosmopolitan fucking retards, trying to bureaucratize the life of the farmer and like just the outback sort of life, and it's a disaster. And they set up their little government colonies, their little offices where they send out their fucking like their female manager to go and manage this area, as a council member or something like that. And it's fucking insufferable. It's the councils that are all getting infected by just these middle-aged women sent there to ruin it. It's fucked. So
100%, Chris. Like, if you want to meet real Aussies these days, like in 2023, you've got to go to rural Australia, and then you will meet real Aussies.
Yeah, go to any cattle station.
Not in cities. You won't meet them in cities, mate.
No.
The lefty soy boys and feminists.
Yeah, you will meet cucks, trannies, and homosexuals in the city. You'll meet real men out in the rural areas.
Yeah. You can still meet in rural Australia, in the outback and top end anyway. You can still meet ringers, and they're like basically Australian cowboys.
Yeah,
ringers are Australian cowboys. They do some of their stuff with like what do they call those things, Chris? The four-wheel drive, the four-wheel drive doobies. They use those things. They use helicopters, but they still also use horses sometimes as well.
Oh, you mean the buggies?
Yeah, those.
Yeah,
I can't even remember ATVs or whatever they call.
Yeah,
but if you go to the rural bits of Australia, you can still meet ringers who are Australian cowboys, basically, 100% the same. They do all the stuff that American cowboys used to do.
Yep.
And they're the people that Banjo Patterson used to write about, when he was writing all those things like the Man from the Snowy River and all this kind of stuff. Those people are still around, but you won't meet them in any Australian city. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I'd never advise anyone from the British Isles not to at least visit Australia and see, would I like this? But it can cost you a fair bit of money to move it. And you really should have an Australian girl, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'll do my best.
Find yourself an Aussie wench.
Oh, damn, there's some damn cute Aussie girls still.
Yeah, because I've heard Melbourne, and the state of Victoria, is where all the madness is. Because on that you were talking about the rural Australia, cattle drovers and all cattle drovers. I actually, because I think I love the going at work experience. What kind of work would be available? Say, because I know there's fruit picking. I know cattle droving would be pretty cool. Just working on a farm.
If you're a fit young man,
which I am,
and you can do most physical jobs, and you don't mind hard work,
and you can tolerate the heat,
and you can tolerate the heat in the summer, you can still find work in rural Australia. Not a problem. But you have to be willing to work bloody hard, because that's the Australian ethos. And the real Aussies are still out in the outback and in the top end. They're not in the cities. Don't ignore Sydney and Melbourne and even Perth. Just bloody well ignore them. And the other thing you can do is, if you've got some sort of mining skill, then you can get a job here pretty easily.
Yeah, because I come from a farming background, but because I thought it might suit, because I usually help my grandfather out with I used to back when I was much younger, but I do know that it'll be quite a transition. Hence, Ireland is cold, wet, damp on most days.
Australia it tends to be either very dry and hot, or dry and humid, and then it rains a lot.
Yeah. Doesn't some parts get rain? Because I've heard only on Christmas it's mostly those scorching hot or something like that. But I know that it gets rain once a year. Maybe I'm wrong.
A bit more than that, but not there. Some bits of large amounts of inland Australia are semi or full-on desert. This is just true. I must just say that Cardamon is talking crap here. He's saying Australian women are very Americanized in my experience. They're even more Americanized than English women, which is hard to believe.
True in Melbourne. True. 100%.
Oh yeah, in Melbourne for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
They actually have started developing this weird American accent tinge on top of their city accent. It's
in Melbourne, I would agree.
Yeah, it's insufferable.
Love of my life was an Australian girl. She was an Australian. Let me think now. Her dad, I think, came over from Scotland when he was a little kid. So she was Australian plus a little bit of Scots, and her Australian bit was totally mixed. Love of my life, best girl I've ever known in my entire life. Dead, sadly, and dead for 20 years, and I still miss her every single day. Every single day I miss her. Great woman, and absolutely drop dead beautiful too. So yeah, there's good Australian girls too.
Ash and Duke saying, interesting that the Abo population is still less than 1 million. Do they all die hideously young or something? Actually, no, the population is exploding at the moment. I think in the last year, there's been almost a 20% increase in their population. Or maybe the past 5 years. There's been a huge population growth with the Aboriginals.
Rama.
They've always been a tiny fraction, and now they are growing while our population, like the sort of Anglo population, is declining. Although with COVID, they did have a bit of a population bump. Everyone did, because everyone was at home going, family life actually isn't so bad. Let's have more kids.
Yeah, and in many Aboriginal bits of far north Queensland and the Northern Territory, you can't buy grog, which is kind of useful for Aboriginals. To be honest, but yeah, I would never put anyone off coming to have a look at Australia. At least Australia is at least 10 to 15 years behind UK in its degeneracy, except in Melbourne and Sydney, which is pretty much the same as everywhere else.
Yep.
Hang on, I need to change that. Maybe Perth. Maybe even Brisbane these days. I mean, there used to be the time when Queensland was very right wing. It isn't anymore, sadly. But yeah, far north Queensland, where Chris lives, in Cairns and around that area, and Darwin, all that top end area. That's where I'd go if I was coming to Australia now. But check it out, because Australia is absolutely 10 to 15 years behind UK. And, who knows if there's enough good guys up in the top end bits. Maybe it won't go so bad. Maybe. I'm not holding my breath, though.
Come and colonize, boys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've had English lorry driver dudes say to me, could I go to Australia and be a heavy goods vehicle driver? Well, yeah, you could. You've just got to do the course. Or know someone who can give you the certificate from the course, which is
Well, Ataman's going, what would be the best place in Australia for someone to move to in relation to job opportunities and social atmosphere? That's not something you can really strike a balance with, unfortunately.
Hard question.
If you want job opportunities, you have to live in a place where the social atmosphere is cancer. But if you want a good social atmosphere, you have to go somewhere that's a little bit poorer of jobs, but you'll have a happier life because you're not going to be surrounded by a bunch of fucking soy boy bugmen and feminists. So you make the choice. But yeah, you basically have to pick one or the other, unfortunately.
Yeah, I look, Ataman is my good friend. He's one of the best men I know. And I just say, look, far north Queensland, maybe the Northern Territory. But yeah, that's where I'd go if that's what I was looking for.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to go your own way, if you wanted to go your own way and sort of start your own business or whatever, then yeah, you can do that in one of these sort of backwater places and do quite well. But if you're talking strictly about, where am I going to go to get a job? You're going to end up, depending on what your training is, you're going to end up in some sort of cosmopolitan area. Yeah. So that's why people move there, but you will end up paying like $1,000 a week rent. It's just like any other big city. It's just exactly the same. Copy paste.
Now, Australia is expensive these days as well, Chris.
Yeah.
I mean, even compared to bloody UK, Australia is expensive in some respects. Yeah, I don't know. Look, if I was going to move to Australia now rather than 23 years ago, I would definitely go far north Queensland or maybe Northern Territory or maybe the absolute top end of Western Australia. Maybe.
Lady of Shalott, regarding Adelaide is a little bit better than Melbourne, but it's fast approaching that same state. It's fast approaching. Every time I go back there, it's rapidly accelerating, and it's that type of place to live.
Where did you come from originally, Chris?
Tasmania originally.
Oh, okay.
And Hobart is mini Melbourne. literally. No, I wasn't from there. I lived in the northwest coast.
Oh, okay. So you were from pretty remote part of the.
Yeah. We were on a farm.
Yeah, fair
and
enough.
then went from there to Adelaide. And when I moved to Adelaide, it was still quite good, but it very rapidly deteriorated into being something like Melbourne or Sydney. Because that they're all aiming for that. All the politicians that run these states and run these capital cities, they all want that. They want that fucking, buzzing cosmopolitan bloody corporate sort of city.
LGBTQ vast amounts of immigration. It ain't a country anymore.
Yep.
I mean, was it? I don't know. I'm trying to remember now. There was someone I saw over the last week who was talking about they don't go to Anzac Day stuff anymore because it's so LGBTQ. And like, there is nothing more Australian than that.
Yep, that all happened when the last Anzac died. What was it, 2009 or 2005?
What you mean the First World War Anzac?
Yeah. Last Anzac alive. What was his name? I'm trying to remember. Alec Campbell. That's it. He died in 2002. Yeah, and it was after he died. You could tell straight away that the seriousness of Anzac Day was very, very quickly, just washed away. And then, because once the last standing person dies, that usually just gives them free reign to fuck with it.
Well, it's like these days, all the bloody kids wear their ancestors' medals, which is crap, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You can carry them, but you shouldn't wear them.
Yep.
I
agree. I've heard a lot of people say that. Yeah.
Even when I first got here, Chris, in 2000, and like Don Bradman, the fabulous Australian batsman, was still alive in 2000, which I thought was great. I used to be a huge cricket fan, of course. My granddad took my dad to see Don Bradman's last innings, and of course he didn't make any runs because he got pulled out. But he took him anyway after World War II. But like when I got here in 2000, you would have very, very old diggers at the RSL, the Return Servicemen's League, on Anzac Day, who would do the tour, and they would all be in 2000. They were almost all Second World War guys, and now they're all Vietnam guys, of course. And the RSL didn't do themselves any good because for a long time they tried to stop the Vietnam dudes from actually joining. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know why, because wasn't there for
no, because it was the first televised war, and everyone was hijacked by that anti-war kind of thing. But I mean, they for the most part they were sent over there. They didn't really want to go over there, and then coming back from Vietnam, experiencing the worst horrors that anyone in any war would have ever experienced in those fucking Vietnamese jungles, and then they come back and then they get spat on. And everyone turns their backs on them, so it's pretty bad because they experienced some of the worst things you could ever imagine, and then to come back and then basically to get rejected by society, that was bad. That was very bad.
Yeah, poor form. And they got rejected for quite a long time by the RSL. Which was ridiculous because tell me a soldier ever who picked his fucking war. You go to the war you're sent to. And the Australians actually legitimately did very well in Vietnam. They didn't lose anywhere.
Yeah, they were always revered everywhere they went to because they conducted themselves very properly.
100%, mate, 100%. But but now, like, if you look at the RSL now, like I bought a poppy off a dude on the 11th, on the 10th or 9th of January last year. November last year. Just because he was an old dude and it was raining, you know.
Mm.
And I'll always do that because, like, you know, they're just guys who used to be in the forces. But I don't know, man. I think the RSL these days it's got taken over by some not so good forces.
Mm. How many of them were drafted for Vietnam?
About a third, I think, mate. Two
Okay.
thirds were like volunteers.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, it has to be said, were like £5 Poms, who, because you got your Australian citizenship in half the time if you joined the Australian Army, and loads of them did. And it was so well known that the Australian Army in Vietnam was called a good little British Army because there were so many like £5 Poms in it.
Mm.
But also, you've equally got to say that, like the original Anzacs in 1915 in Gallipoli, loads of them were first and second generation Poms because of all the free immigrants who'd arrived in Australia.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not suggesting that like, you know, the Australians were not brave in themselves, because of course they are. I mean, you know, in World War II, the Aussies were the first guys to beat the Germans on land at what was that port in North Africa? I'm trying to remember now. It'll come to me in a minute. I'm having a brain fart. But anyway, the Australians held this port against Rommel and defeated him several times when he tried to take it. And the Australians were equally the first Allied soldiers in World War II to beat the Japanese on land in New Guinea, which wasn't bad for a nation which back in those days had like, what, 12 million people, maybe? So Tobruk, thank you, Lee Ham. It was Tobruk where the Australians beat Rommel on land in North Africa in World War II. And then some of the same troops beat the Imperial Japanese Army on land in New Guinea. First time ever, both for both of those guys. So, you know, the Australians were pretty tough bastards back then. But if they came back these days, they'd look at modern Australians and vomit, basically, most of them.
Yeah, yep. I'm trying to find this entry. Someone tweeted it at me. It was some war journalist describing the Anzacs when they arrived. Let's see if I can find it. You're right. Talk amongst yourself, chaps. I'll find it.
The Australian Army was like in World War One, for example, on the Western Front. The Australians, along with the New Zealanders and the Canadians, were the shock troops of the British Empire. They were the guys who we sent into the worst battles because they were the best guys who were going to do that.
Here we go. Australian men were universally regarded as physical perfection, an English journalist named Ashmead Bartlett wrote. I do not suppose any country in its palmiest days ever sent forth to the field of battle a finer body of men than those Australian, New Zealand and Tasmanian troops. Physically, they are the finest men I have ever seen in any part of the world. In fact, I had no idea that such a race of giants existed in the 20th century. Some of their battalions average 5'10", and every man seems to be a trained athlete. Based.
You know what that really says, though, Chris, don't you? It's how badly fed most of the English working class
exactly.
back in those days.
Yeah, we were
like
well fed.
Modern Englishmen are about the same size as modern Americans and modern Australians.
Yeah.
It wasn't true back then. True back then.
Once all the nutritional holes were filled, everyone sort of averaged the same height. Yeah.
But but they were really good troops.
Yeah.
And the Australians in particular were well known for, like, in World War One, like if they surrounded a German blockhouse and the Germans didn't surrender, they'd just kill everyone who eventually didn't surrender, which was fair enough because, like, you know, they were killing their guys. So their deal was and I think it's entirely fair. Like, okay, surrender, then you can be prisoners. If you don't surrender, then all right, we'll kill all of you. Which for the next podcast they went to meant the Germans thought, maybe not kill an extra 3 Aussies, you know. So, which is, you know, it's just the way war works.
Yeah. All right, I got to head off, fellas.
No worries, guys. We're not going to go much longer anyway, Chris.
All right.
Many thanks for joining us as always. We
Thanks for
did play one of your tunes at the start.
Was it White Man's Burden again?
No, Shilling a Day this time.
Very good.
But I tell you what, as soon as you finish Fight for the Young British Soldier, that's going to be the next one I do.
Yes.
But
yes.
But yeah, no, thanks for coming on, Chris.
No worries. Thanks, guys.
Go on.
Sorry for derailing. See you later. Bye.
Bye.
All right, gents. We're not going to go too much longer because we've been 2.5 hours. Final thoughts, people, please.
Shit. Yeah, on like topic of like, you know, all the people in the British Isles generally being mixed with one another, and that doesn't justify mass immigration. I'm thinking, I mean, in Sweden they're putting up this article where they're saying, oh well, there's loads of Viking corpses that have got genetic traces from the British Isles and Southern Europe. Therefore, infinite Somalis into Sweden is all right. Yeah, totally. Because the Hakut Sigurdsson from Stockholm taking an Irish wife after he spent some time raiding there is 100% relatable to bringing home loads of like Somalis and Pakistanis and all this into Sweden.
Mitch, I'm sure that Thomas knows that Dublin, for example, started life as a Viking slave trading.
Yeah,
it was a Viking slave trading settlement, basically. That's how it started. So what a surprise! There are Irish and English and Scottish and Welsh girls whose DNA is in with the Vikings. Not a big surprise, really, is it? It's got nothing to do with importing Somalians or Syrians or any of these other bloody people. And, you know, to be fair, if you look at Wessex in England, you'll find there's a little bit of Viking DNA in Wessex. And some of that came from the guys in Wessex capturing Viking girls and taking them home. This is what used to happen in the Dark Ages, you know?
Yeah, it's not just what I mean. You take, for example, in Sweden also, they found like this one Viking who apparently was half. They said, oh, he had a southern DNA about him. What they don't tell you is the fact that he was half French, so like from like Provence sort of way. So yeah, he would have been slightly tanned, but there's no way he'd be full on sub-Saharan like that article heading implies it out to be. And I mean, you got the whole Anglo-Saxons and Vikings intermarrying. I mean, their languages were mutually intelligible. I mean, for example, because I know my fair bit of Old English from a book net by this point, I can read like 20% of Norwegian with little to no struggle, just off like, you know, just off knowing a bit of Old English. And then you got to think with English and German, for example, I mean, they share like half a words. So you can imagine that Old Norse and Old English back then were just mutually intelligible enough that intermarriage was pretty common. But that in no way justifies, you know, loads of Pakistanis or Somalis or I don't know, Bantus or whatever coming into Sweden when, you know, I mean, for example, with Sweden, the only mass immigration they've ever really had was Huguenot French in the 16th century or whatever.
Yeah, we go on. They go on about the lefties go on about that in England all the time, and yet the entire immigration of Huguenot French into the UK over about 40 or 50 years was less than 1 year's immigration today.
Yeah, it's what? Over the space of 5 years, it was 50,000 people.
Yeah.
And it's not just that. I mean, you thought a lot of these Huguenots would have been Northern French. So the Normans, I mean, they conquered us and they were generally quite cruel to us.
Didn't conquer me, mate. I mean, you may say they conquered you. They didn't conquer me. But
I mean, our language says otherwise, but let's get. I mean, yeah, but the thing about the Normans and like Northern French in general, whether they breed on.
Mitch, you do know the only reason the Norman French continued as they did was because of the English longbow archers. Like, would the 100 Years' War would have been a disaster for England without them. So they didn't conquer me, mate.
I mean,
I'm joking. By the way. I'm joking, by the way, Mitch.
Autism moment, man.
I'm joking.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, like I don't know, Northern French would have been where most of the Huguenots came from, whose phenotypes wouldn't have been too dissimilar to ours.
No, not at all.
But then you hear like these people, they frame it as the dark French, like the French you'll get from like Provence, who look more like Italians, which even then that doesn't justify Somalis into our country. So,
but nothing justifies Somalis into our country, and nothing justifies Somalis into the Republic of Ireland either, if you ask me. But that's just me.
Here.
That's just me. But yeah, I'm sorry, Mitch. I wasn't being totally serious, mate. But I was partly in the Norman French. Yes, you could say the Norman French partially conquered England, but there were so few of them that they haven't left much of a DNA mark on the English or the Welsh. And when it came to England fighting France again in the 100 Years' War, it was the English, overwhelmingly Anglo-Saxon archers and Celtic Welsh archers, it has to be said, who were the reason why England won for so long as they did.
I mean, the Normans were small in number, but that didn't stop them from massively influencing us. It's like you take the Hungarians, for example. I mean, your average Hungarian pretty much has no DNA from the original Hungarians who came over, conquered the place. And your average Hungarian, they're descended from the people who were conquered, not the actual conquerors. But that doesn't stop Hungarians from identifying with those Asiatic invaders to begin with. So there is that.
Guys, just saying I've got to go now.
No worries. Thank you, Tristan. Tristan, you've been on a couple of times before. You are always very welcome on this stream. Go on, mate.
All right. Well,
I'll see you, Tristan. Be sure to join my Instagram live. It might be on after this.
All right. I'll give that a look. Right. See you.
Talk to you. See you.
Go on, sir. All right. Thomas, you can finish this off if you like.
We're finished now, are we? Well, first of all, Iron Duke, I'd just like to thank you very much for allowing me as a guest on your show, on your
Always
stream.
welcome, man. You can come on anytime you want.
Because I like to meet new people who have got, look, I like listening to new ideas, especially from a conservative right. I think dissident right? I don't know, because I know the term.
I am sensible centrist adjacent.
I'll go with that. But listen, it was lovely talking to you and everyone else here, and everyone else who's like all the other people here. I hope I didn't interrupt anyone earlier.
You were great, mate. You were great. Don't worry.
Oh, that's good to know. That's good to know. Well, first of all, yeah, thank you very much. And as always, good day.
Oh, look, mate. All I would say is I am a huge Anglo-Celtic nationalist supporter. That's what I am.
Yeah,
And
from one
your
nationalist
point,
to another.
Yep, from your point of view, I just say Earing go bra.
Erin go bra. I guess
Yeah.
Slán agus Bannock.
Exactly.
That means goodbye. Yeah.
Exactly, man. Go on.
All right. Thank you very much.
Please come on again. You're always welcome.
I certainly will. And yeah, thank you for the invitation in the first place. It's been a pleasure.
Before you go, Thomas, Lady Charlotte, who I know has relatives on both sides of the Irish border, she's saying, can you put Thomas's details in the video links, as I'd like to contact him about Ireland. If you DM me your YouTube channel and all that,
I will, yeah.
I will absolutely put them in the description for the stream so that people can follow you and all that.
Well, anyone who's watching this, like that one particular individual who was just asked, my channel's name is Planet of the Gale. So yeah, it's I recently set it up and I posted a couple of videos, so you can all find it there. There'll be future content.
More power to you, man. More power to you, mate.
Absolutely, 100%. Right. Well, on that note, I'm signing off. See you guys.
Go well and Happy New Year, sir.
Happy New Year, man. Talk to you.
All right. Any final thoughts, Mitch?
Well, nah, can't say what I do.
You're disappointing sometimes, Mitch. Honestly. You should be talking about the larger white alliance and Europeans and.
I mean, I'm more of a pan-Germanic guy myself, but that's just because I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
You're a pan-Germanic guy. No, you're not. You're a Russian guy for the most part, aren't you? Which I'm not against at all. I think the Ruskies are perfectly fine these days.
Yeah, it's if it was up to me, I would have something like a London, Moscow, Berlin axis or something like that.
That'd be cool. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
It's like what? Because a Russian once said to me, "Oh yeah, you Anglos are very good at inventing stuff, but Germans are very good at engineering it. But then we Russians are very good at getting the materials for you to do both of those things."
I'm just thinking if we had a Russo-Anglo alliance, which has been around in the past, but if we had one now, you could have like a big, powerful Russian army and maybe a big, powerful Royal Navy. And then we could turn around and say to the Americans, get fucked.
Yeah, you know, I actually had a conversation with this Hungarian fellow on Telegram, and he just goes, "Oh yeah, look, with Americans, they micromanage everything you do, but the Russians, their attitude is just don't be a dick to us, and we'll just let you do whatever you want."
Yeah.
Yep. So what? I mean, Central Asia, you know, people either go at Russia because Central Asia sometimes rebels against Russia, but I'm thinking, okay, but the Central Asians don't go ahead and act like what Ukraine does on a daily basis. So Russia doesn't particularly mind it. Whereas,
Mitch, can I ask you? I'm because I'm a firm believer in like normies don't believe anything. There's this really good Aussie girl in Russia. What's she called?
Aussie Homestead Girl or something like that.
Aussie Homestead Girl. That's the one. Mitch, talk about Aussie Homestead Girl, because I reckon if most ordinary Brits and Aussies, Canadians, etc., watched Aussie Homestead Girl, they would suddenly realize that, like, you know, Russia ain't the world's worst place at all. Because all Aussie Homestead Girl does, she's she lives on I don't know, a little farm in the middle of nowhere in Russia with her, I presume, Russian husband. And she does these brilliant videos, which are not political at all. They're just her doing her normal life, sometimes with her ma, and just talking to ordinary Russians. And they're all pretty good. Ashton Duke says, is she hot? Yeah, she's actually quite cute, I think. I wouldn't say she was hot, but she's quite a cute girl. Yeah, she is. And she doesn't speak bad Russian, although I suspect it's not as good as Mitch's. But
I mean,
and they've all got English translations on them.
Yeah, like with the thing about Russians is, for example, if you, let's say, even if you were just to visit there, if you speak their language, they'll just treat you like you're royalty based off that.
Yeah,
like that's generally what Eastern Europeans are like, though. Is that like if let's say you go to their countries and you speak their language, even if your pronunciation is dog shit terrible, the very fact that you made the effort to begin with,
you're trying. Yeah.
It's like, for example, where I'm from in the West Midlands, I come across Poles and I've come across Poles and Romanians and Hungarians. The Romanians I've not really talked to, but Poles and Hungarians, for example, yeah, the pronunciation isn't that great in English, but because I understand them, I don't really press them over it. It's a similar situation to as in Eastern Europe, where your pronunciation doesn't have to be great. I mean, with Polish, for example, I mean, you'll be lucky if you can actually read the damn language. But yeah, it's as long as you bother with the language, they'll just treat you like you're royalty because on one hand, Poles, for example, worship British people almost, and same with the Americans. So you going to learn their language, and this goes for Russians as well. If you go to learn their language and engage with them, and not just be some arrogant Westoid who lords it over them, yeah, they'll just treat you like you're royalty. Like you have no problem.
I tell you, the only thing I've ever seen, Mitch, is that I've only known 2 or 3 Russians, like in real life. And if you even know a little bit of Russian history, they think, oh, cool.
Yeah.
Because most people don't know anything about Russia, you know. But even if you know a little bit of Russian history, and it's mostly nothing to do with the Communist Party, by the way, it's just like, you know, Peter the Great and Catherine the Great and all this kind of stories and assorted czars. Just know a little bit about Russian history, and most Russians will, like, they might not totally agree with you, but they're just impressed you know anything about Russian history.
Yeah, because for example, you get the image of Russians being very sort of imperialistic and arrogant and all this. I'm thinking, well, it's not really true, because I mean, Eastern Europeans in general generally tend to be modest and humble. Like, if you go to Russia, for example, and you act like some arrogant, if you act in a very arrogant way in Russia, you know, you're not generally well liked, which is why the oligarchs, for example, they have to live so much distance away from the average Russian.
With 15 bodyguards each.
Yeah, because the Russians just, you know, it's the same with the Finnish in a way, that we just despise arrogance. I mean, I'm like that myself. I generally have a distaste towards arrogance in the same way the Russians do, which is why, it's like, for example, I've known Russians in university who told me, oh yeah, like some of your mentality and like some of your like habits that you do, like how you dress like a gopnik at times, yeah, you'd fit in Russia. So that's
I remember once years ago now, Mitch, I was talking to this Russian dude who I knew in South Africa, and I was talking to him about General Todleben, who was the genius who fortified Sebastopol during the Crimean War, 1854 or 1856. And he was one of those German generals, basically from Finland, I guess, or that part of the world. And this dude was just amazed I knew about General Todleben. He was a great general. Like honestly, didn't do the Brits any favors, but you know, he wasn't fighting for the Brits; he was fighting for the Russians. But
Yeah.
he was a damn good general. So, you know, and these days, 2023, there is no reason for Britain and Russia to be enemies. There's none.
Yeah.
Like, why does Britain care who runs fucking Ukraine? We don't, for any rational reason. Like Biden might, Indian banker Sunak might, but I don't think any real British people do. But you know, that's just me. Anyway, final thoughts, Mitch?
Best wishes to everyone in this new year, because I don't know. I mean, I was expecting this winter to be a lot harsher than it actually turned out to be, because we had one cold week and then it just petered out to become mild. So the whole yeah, it's not going to be some shock horror like what people said about Germany having a really cold winter and hundreds of thousands of elderly freezing to death because
That's
Germans.
next year. That's next year.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the whole trust of plan thing. I'll believe it when I see it at this point, because I don't know. I mean, who knows? I mean, perhaps the next winter will actually be harsh but I mean, thinking you'd think this winter would have been harsh given Russian energy has been pretty much cut off at this point, and we and our Western leaders just generally like to shoot themselves in the foot because we just tap dance to America's pleasure at this point.
Yeah, sadly I have to agree. Look, don't get me wrong. I like many Americans. There are many good Americans. There are many good Americans who have served in the American Armed Forces, but their government now, pretty much same as the British government now, not good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about in terms of Americans I can get on with if you're talking like Southerners, but if you're talking like Californians or like most Californians and like New Yorkers, they're just, I don't know, their accents, for example, can grate me, and they can also have a sort of more, I suppose the word comes like arrogance in regards to like how culture imperialistic they'll be.
We have people on our Discord, Mitch, like Don the Pleb, who I believe is from Texas. Lives in Texas anyway. He's a very good guy.
Yeah,
and people like AA and that scumbag Greenweather who misdirects AA are totally wrong about Don the Pleb, who's a much better guy than people think. But I just need you to say that because I always try to be honest.
Yeah, there's a like G.K. Chesterton article from like years ago I read where it's like where G.K. Chesterton goes, "Oh yeah, like the Southern American states generally tend to be some of the best states out there just because they're very much like us for mentality." And yeah, like G.K. Chesterton, like Jenny held up the Dixieland as like the ideal of America, like where you know it because he described it in a similar way to how Tolkien would have described the Shire. In other words,
yeah.
About America,
Did you know, Mitch? I had to defend the late great J.R. Tolkien from some German dude who was utterly claiming he just copied the Lord of the Rings from Wagner, which he did not. He took something from it, but he took something from almost all English and British myth and high fantasy, and also the same from Scandinavia and Germany. He took from all of that stuff because he was a professor of Anglo-Saxon. And he actually said that one of the things he wrote Lord of the Rings for was to replace the lost English Anglo-Saxon myths that were destroyed by the Norman invasion.
Yeah, it's not just like the Germanic myths and legends that is what I'm talking, but also like you got the Elvish languages, which are like a mix of Welsh and Finnish from what I've been told. And you also got this book called Kalevala, if I'm pronouncing it right. It's like a Finnish mythology book.
Yep.
And yeah, Tolkien actually wanted to learn Finnish just to read that book. Which
Tolkien was a good guy. I mean, he was born in South Africa. He was a great scholar of Anglo-Celtic, Germanic, and Scandinavian history and myth and fantasy. He served in the First World War. And the only reason he didn't die on the Somme was because he caught trench fever, or otherwise he almost certainly would have done. He was a damn good guy, but he didn't write Lord of the Rings as like myth for the whole world. He wrote it as myth for England and Britain, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about a German guy who said that, but I mean, I've been talking to a German fellow on Telegram. He just goes, "Oh yeah, because the word elf in German, it has the connotations of like pixies and fairies, that sort of thing. So Tolkien created a whole new word in the German language for the sake of the elves he created. So the German fellow I'm talking to, like, he says, like, oh yeah, Tolkien shared a greater love for the German language than most Germans do these days, for example.
Yeah. Look, he took stuff from the ancient world, from ancient Rome. He took stuff from the Western ancient Roman Byzantine Empire, and he took stuff from all of the Northern European cultures. Absolutely, he did, but that's because he was a scholar. I mean, go and look at his review of Beowulf, which is probably one of the best ones out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll confess that I've not really studied Beowulf that much. I mean, I was going from my local library the other day, and there's a Tolkien book all about how he studied King Arthur. Yep. He only did one book about King Arthur, but apparently it's well studied. So I might get back at some point. But...
Yep, there's a thing online, Mitch, about Beowulf, where like Tolkien expounds on what it's really about. And there are these things like also back to that era where an Anglo-Saxon warrior whose lord has been killed, like laments on what can I defend anymore, which I think is particularly appropriate for us today. When what the hell do we defend anymore? I'm a former British soldier, but like, would I join the army now? Not a fucking chance.
Yeah.
Why would I fight for Rishi Sunak? Never. Under any circumstances. For what?
Yeah, I was going to say that poem is called The Wanderer, and I would show.
The Wanderer, you're right.
Yeah,
man. Yes.
That article, that particular poem, I'd show to everyone if I could, because it's just.
It is. It's really good.
Yeah, I had to learn, like, when I was doing my GCSEs, I had to learn like this poem by a lesbian for my GCSE. Yeah, this Irish lesbian woman who wrote a poem about the layers of an onion. I could have spent that time studying The Wanderer instead, but we had to learn about a bloody lesbian poem instead.
100%, man.
Yeah.
No, man, you're best. Anyway, we've gone nearly 3 hours, and I'm going to finish us off. Unless you have anything final to say, I'm going to finish us off with some music.
Nah, I got nothing final to say at this point now.
All right, man. You're a base dude, man, and I still think Russia's going to win in Ukraine.
Me too. Slava Putina.
100.
the heat of the sun, houses burned out of hand. You'll see them in a town once a mile, ruled by violence and fire. You'll see them out of the north, of the sky, who decide what is and what is not. 700 Glengarry men heard the cry come ringing down the glen. Never mind the sand, take your rifle in your hand, the Argyles are moving again. Amid sandbags and wire, hit by terrorist fire, you'll see them with a bayonet and gun and streets scorched by the sun. You'll see them from the town of Greater, you'll hear the cry, you must learn to live in peace or learn to die. 700 Glengarry men heard the cry come ringing down the glen. Never mind the sand, take your rifle in your hand, the Argyles are moving again. To Aden goes our song, from the Arctic to Hong Kong, you'll see them amid jungle hill or town, against yellow, white or brown, you'll see them. For this is but a chapter in our bloody history, fighting for our future and to keep our country free. 700 Glengarry men heard the cry come ringing down the glen. Never mind the sand, take your rifle in your hand, the Argyles are moving. 700 Glengarry men heard the cry come ringing down the glen. Never mind the sand, take your rifle in your hand, the Argyles are moving again.
Okay, guys, that was 700 Glengarry Men, which is a very good tune about the Argyll and Southern Highlanders, one of the finest regiments ever to serve in the British Army. From Patriotic Archive, please do go and check out his channel. He has some really great British and also other nations military and nationalist music. Thanks very much for joining us for this fairly long stream. We'll be back next week with more of the same, but hopefully some different stuff too. This was a pretty Irish one, which I'm happy to do. Yeah, Ireland's part of the British Isles, whatever. So go well, guys. Don't give up the fight. We ain't lost that yet. And also, I would like to say, Lady of Shalott is about to start a YouTube channel of her own. Many of you will have seen Lady of Shalott as a wrench on lots of other channels, but she's going to start her own channel soon. So look out for that. And as soon as we know more information, you'll find it here. But Lady of Shalott is one of the best women on the internet. She's also a married mother. So, you know, don't go too simping. But yeah, all right. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week. And Chris Gard and I are working on a number 3 Australian history stream as well. So go on, and we'll see you soon.